like to bring the meeting to order of the Wilmington City Council. I'd like to welcome all who are here with us this evening, all those who are watching us at home. Thank you for taking an interest in your government at this time. I'd like to call on Reverend Cleo Williamson, who is the Associate Pastor of St. Stephen AME Church, for the invocation, and we'll ask everyone to stand afterwards for the Pledge of Allegiance. Reverend, welcome.
Thank you. It is an honor to be here. Let us pray. Almighty and Heavenly Father, Maker and Creator of all things. First of all, Heavenly Father, we give you honor and we thank you for bringing us such a long ways, for blessing us, Heavenly Father, when we didn't deserve to be blessed. You continue to shower your mercy and grace upon us. And for that, Heavenly Father, we say thank you. Now, Heavenly Father, we ask your blessings upon all that's here today, dear Lord, and the words that's said and what is done, dear Lord, be according to your word. Help us to realize that you're God, and there's nothing that you don't know and don't see. And Heavenly Father, just bless us in a special way, dear Lord, that we'll do your will. And Lord, we'll give you all the honor and the glory. Blessings upon everyone here, dear Lord. Thank you again and again and again. Amen. 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 Amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have some very special guests in the audience I see this evening. I'd like to welcome our county manager, Mr. Chris Coudray, is with us here this evening. Thank you, Chris, for being here, and Commissioner and Vice Chair of the County Commissioners, Leanne Pierce, former Wilmington City Council Mayor Pro Tem Jim Quinn, and is also with us here this evening. Thank you, Jim, for being here. At this time, I'm going to have a special presentation. I would like to ask Ms. Louise McCall. She'll meet me at the front of the, up here. Who else is here? Oh yeah, and former Mayor Spence Broadhurst. Sorry, Spence. Actually, come on up here, Spence, and his wife Jennifer, and also Kelly DeDebo. Is Kelly here? Come on up here, Kelly. Well, this is a tremendous honor to be here this evening to make this special presentation. But before we make this presentation, I believe, Dylan, we have a special message here from the governor of the state of North Carolina.
Hi, everybody. Governor Roy Cooper here. Congratulations to my good friend Spence Broadhurst on becoming a member of the Order of the Longleaf Pine, the state's highest honorary society. Spence here joining the company of so many outstanding North Carolinians who dedicated their lives to serving our great state. Thanks to your service as bank president, mayor of Wilmington, and community leader, North Carolina is a better place to live, work, and raise a family. And your dedication doesn't stop there. Your work on the Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina and the North Carolina Banking Commission has helped to support economic and business growth in every corner of our state. You've made a remarkable impact on Wilmington and the entire state. Spence, thank you for always giving me sound advice and giving our state your strong leadership. Welcome, my friend, to the Order of the Longleaf Pine.
I'm going to read the order. The state of North Carolina, Governor Roy Cooper, Governor, reposing special confidence in the integrity, learning, and skill of Spence H. Broadhurst, I do by these presents confer the Order of the Longleaf Pine. With the rank of Ambassador Extraordinary, privilege to enjoy all rights granted to members of this exalted order, among which is the special privilege to propose the following North Carolina toast in select company anywhere in the free world. Here's to the land of the longleaf pine, the summer land where the sun does shine, where the weak grow strong and the strong grow great. Here's to down home, the old North State.
I never said Billy could read, so just so you know that. You know, I met Spence probably over 22 years ago. I met him when he come to the office to run for mayor the first time. I've watched him throughout his career. I've watched him with his children. I've watched him move to Greensboro. I've watched him move back here. I watched him marry Jennifer, which is the best thing he's done. And he's just a friend, he's part family to me and has been. And I just love you, and I'm glad that we could do this. And I have to give Kelly some thanks, because she did this thing electronically, and I don't know how to do it electronically, so there you go. And she did all the research for the bank, so congratulations.
Well, there's a few of you here that know me. I'm kind of looking around now, and you pulled this over on me. I'll promise you that. And Bill Cameron walking up the steps. You here to see Louise tonight? Of course I am. And there are not many times that I'm speechless. Most of you know there's not many times that I'm speechless, but you found one. I don't know what to say other than to Louise. She said something about family. They're friends and they're family, and then there's my relationship with Louise McCall, which goes deeper than both. And I want to thank the mayor here for giving me the support and giving us the venue, and thank you for that. And thank you for also calling me and telling me to be here for Louise McCall. That was pretty convincing, and you're right about the best thing I've done is marry Jennifer a couple months ago, and thank you for that, and Kelly, thank you for that. And for those of you that stumbled in here because of this, I really appreciate it. That's awfully kind of you, and I know what's behind that recognition, and I do not take it lightly. Again, I just don't know what to say other than to all of you, thank you so much.
Well, hold on for a second. I'd like to, on behalf of, on behalf of the city of Wilmington, I just want to say congratulations and thank you, Spence. Way back in 2003, now 20 years ago, myself and Spence and Lethea Hankins, and Catherine Moore, and Jason Thompson, and Jim Quinn, and Laura Padgett served on this board. And one of the most important decisions in the redevelopment and the revitalization of downtown Wilmington took place, and that was the relocation of PPD back downtown. It spurred and started the whole revitalization of the north end of downtown, and of course we haven't looked back since. I know the amount of work, determination that went into that decision, and it was not a light decision to make, along with our former city manager Sterling Cheatham and the team here in the city of Wilmington. We worked very hard in a laser-like focus to make that happen, and you should be proud of what you started and hopefully what we'll be finishing here, but it has been an outstanding body of work that began here, and we never look back. And I just want to say thank you for your great public service to this great city. Thank you, Spence. God bless you. Our next item of business is our consent agenda, 1 through 8. Are there any items that any councilman would like to hear separately? If not, what are the wishes of this council?
C4, Mr. Mayor.
C4? Okay. Anything else? Okay, can we have a motion to approve the consent agenda items 1 through 8, excluding item C4? We have a motion made by Councilmember Barnett, second by Councilmember Anderson. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously. At this time, I'd like to recognize Councilmember Waddell.
Yeah, this seems pretty comprehensive, very straightforward, and I just basically was wanting to get maybe a general overview on the record schedule that it seems like we're adopting. Are we basically just adopting the same practices as other local government agencies in North Carolina? And then I did have a specific question with regards to page 17. It's item number 1.54. Maybe a misinterpretation, but it reads that the minutes of a public body such as council that those records could be destroyed after a year. Just any sort of clarification I could get would be helpful.
Yes, sir. In general, this is the schedule. The schedule that we're adopting is the schedule from the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. They put forth a recommended schedule. There are some items within each schedule that they allow the cities or municipalities to fill in themselves. They leave them as blanks, and then we can either fill them in or not, and then we adopt the schedule. You adopt the schedule based on that. With regard to the specific number that you mentioned, 1.54 public bodies minutes, is that the one that you're referring to? Destroy in the office after a year is minutes of meetings and subcommittees after their value ends. So if you'll look at the top under A, it says retain in office permanently official minutes of the governing board and its subsidiary boards, as well as all attachments necessary to understand their actions. And so in A, it covers your minutes up there, but in C, if you'll look, it says destroy in office minutes of committees and subcommittees when the reference value ends, if the minutes and actions and decisions are entered as part of the minutes of a parent board, that type of thing. And so where it says 1 year, it's just everything that falls into category C, which
Understood.
is not the primary minutes.
Okay, thank you. I move to approve.
Okay. We have a motion to approve by Councilmember Waddell, second by Mayor Pro Tem Haynes. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously. That brings us to our next item of business, which is our public information. We have 3 speakers that have signed up to speak with us this evening. First speaker is Mr. Kyle Weekly, who would be speaking to us about interest in renting the old Wilmington Coastal Boxing Gym. Mr. Weekly in? Mr. Weekly? Okay. We'll move on to our next speaker, who is Mr. David Ward, who will be speaking to us about the Hinton Avenue Bike Path. Mr. Ward, come forward, please.
I'm here about item R3, I believe it is. Let's see here, home page. Yeah, R3. Condemnation. I'm over where they're building the bike path on Hinton Avenue, have a parcel of land there. And we are working on things right now, trying to work out, I actually have a problem with a telephone pole. And a guide wire coming off the pole comes way into my property with the easement. So we're trying to work on that. I understand there are 16 others that are doing the same thing or working on problems with the bike path. So what I'd like to ask is the council table this condemnation and give us time to work out these issues. It'd be great if we could move the bike path back where it was planned on the east side of Hinton Avenue, where it was to begin with. It wouldn't have to disturb trees, telephone poles, cause drainage issue problems for my property and some others over there, but we may be beyond that, but at least give us time to see if we can work out the issues.
How long, excuse me, Mr. Ward, how long have you been working with the city on this, or?
Probably be about 6 months off and on. You know, they've been going through the process of putting in stakes and figuring out where things were going, trying to figure out what Duke Energy wanted there, and it's just been a little bit drawn out trying to get these things together. And now we see, you know, what they're needing, and they've come in and put some stakes in. I actually have a little house there. There's some of the property I inherited from my family, and there's a little house I have there up front, and this easement comes within about 8 feet, 9 feet of the house, almost halfway down that house. And I've been working with Cindy Wolf and others, you know, different engineers. I'm planning on trying, maybe come back later on. We'll see what the economy does. Before this council to try to put townhouses. I'd like to build townhouses there. And this one easement would kill one of my buildings. Actually, I have 2 different plans that are drawn that would knock out 2 different ones out of 3. And I've been down to talk to staff about it, and I've talked to the attorney about it, and different things. You know, we're trying to work this out. Hopefully we can move the pole, do something different with the easement, maybe 2 poles together without having to put a guide wire, something. And we're scheduled next week to meet with the engineers and with Duke's engineers, you know, to try to work this out.
Sure.
So I'm asking you, just give us more time and see if we can do that. Because I'd hate to see, like myself, a lot of people go through a lot of trouble, you know, trying to get this worked out. Would be very nice.
Meredith, did you have something?
Yes, sir. I would just say that our office has been working with Mr. Ward and with multiple other of these property owners regarding some of these issues. With regard to this specific project, though, because of the federal funds involved and the deadlines that they have given us, this has to go tonight as opposed to be continued, or else we lose those federal funds for the project. However, just because you give us the ability to condemn and those condemnations go through, that doesn't mean that we stop negotiating, and we would certainly never go to court with any of these property owners until all negotiations had failed. It is a long, drawn-out process, though, however, working with Duke Energy, and that has put us behind in some of our negotiations. But it's the timeline for the federal money that's pushing us to go with these condemnations now, and that's why that there are more than there normally are as well, because of the abbreviated timeline. But I can tell you that we will not move on any of these parcels. I mean, the project will keep going, but we will keep discussing all of these things with them until negotiations come to a standstill.
Well, I hope that works out good for all of us that are, you know, in this situation. But I don't know. Government projects seem to be drawn out longer than anything else I've ever seen, especially federal fund. It looks like they would have more time. I was told 6 months ago we had 2 years almost to go before they would start this project. And then all of a sudden now I got a letter, there's condemnation going on. I'm going, wow, what happened? And in the middle, they changed, one of the engineers changed, they put a new person over the project. And there was some miscommunication, I think. I don't want to say anything negative, but there was some miscommunication to begin with. And now we've got Mike, another engineer that's over it. He's doing a grand job. Mike, if you're out there listening, yay.
Gotcha. Okay.
But if you could consider giving us more time, that's what I'd like to see.
Okay.
And really, move the sidewalk over. It's on the side where the park's on that side. You won't have to worry about children crossing over. You won't have to worry about taking up the sidewalk where Hinton Oaks is. They'll have to share with bicycles. They can't walk their pets no longer on the sidewalk. Down there have hot asphalt. No longer walking little Fido out there.
Thank you, sir.
But anyway, consider it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Mr. Andrew Blank. He'll be speaking to us about the Rise Together initiative.
Evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council members. In 2020, this council unanimously passed the Rise Together resolution, in which you stated the mayor and city council seek to nurture a better understanding of the ongoing challenges of equity, diversity, and inclusion. I'm here tonight to make you aware of such a challenge. Today, New Hanover County Board of Education announced a hearing on the book Stamped, Racism, Anti-Racism, and You by children's author Jason Reynolds, adapted from Eben Kendi's book Stamped from the Beginning. This stems from an Ashley High parents' attempt to ban this book from AP Language and Literature curriculum. There are plenty of legal arguments to be made. For example, in Tinker v. Des Moines, the U.S. Supreme Court held it can hardly be argued that either students or teachers shed their constitutional rights to freedom of speech or expression at the schoolhouse gate. But I'm no lawyer, I'm a social science researcher, so that's the perspective I'd like to share with you. The research shows that children's books play a pivotal role in the development of academic skills as well as social and emotional learning. Children's literature can build understanding and appreciation of a child's own culture and the culture of others. Dr. Rudian Sims Bishop describes a, quote, mirror text as one that transforms human experience and reflects it back to us. And in that reflection, we see our own lives and experiences as part of the larger human experience. Students of color often find a lack of mirrors in their literary worlds. And Dr. Bishop found that when children cannot find themselves in the books that they read, they learn a powerful lesson about how they're devalued in the society in which they're a part. Now, this is the first book challenge hearing in district history, but banning books is not new. During the first half of the 2022-23 school year, PEN America identified nearly 1,500 instances of individual books banned. And of the children's books published in the US in 2019, only about 12% of those were about Black or African characters, yet 30% of the banned titles were books about race, racism, or featuring characters of color. Now, I'll never know what it's like to be a student of color, and most of you won't either. One identity that Councilmember Rivenbark and I share is we're both veterans, and putting our Army-Navy rivalry aside, it's good to see you up there, sir. If the agenda holds tonight, you plan to appoint me to the Wilmington Tree Commission, and I'm excited and honored by that. But you know what excited me even more in reviewing the supporting documents before this council meeting is you're also appointing General Cooley, another Army veteran, to the Firemen's Relief Fund Board of Trustees. Recently, a submarine shipmate of mine died by suicide, and I've spent the past few weeks looking for a local veteran peer support group. From General Cooley's application in the supporting documents, I learned about the Cape Fear Veteran Resilience Project, and I'm now looking forward to the Veteran Voices event at Brunswick Beer and Cider on August 23rd. Maybe I'll see you there. And again, that's not the same as growing up Black in a city where institutions like slavery in 1898 cast a long shadow on our history. But maybe it helps us try to appreciate the importance of seeing ourselves represented in government, in school, in literature. Your constituents care about this issue. During your last city council meeting, the school board held an audience hour. 80 citizens registered to speak, only 20 got to. And you care about schools too. After the school shooting in August 2021, Councilmember Waddell tweeted, "When will we wake up? Ensuring the safety of Wilmington's children should be our top priority." Schools can promote safety by promoting responsive relationships, emotionally safe environments, and skills development, which cultivates what we call protective factors to buffer against mental health risks and ultimately reduce risky behavior and violence. I recognize this is a county school board issue, but as our elected officials, your position matters to your constituents. Targeting books that tell the story of Black history in the US sets a horrific precedent and sends a chilling message to your students. The hearing's Friday, September 1st at 9 a.m. in the Board of Education Center. I hope to see you there. I hope you'll seize this moment to take a stand on behalf of the students in your city. Thanks for your time and all you do for the city.
Thank you, sir. Okay. That brings us to our next item of business, which are our public hearings. Our first public hearing this evening is item PH1, which is an ordinance amending the official zoning maps of the city to rezone property containing 2.54 acres of land located at 5030, 5032, and 5034 Moonlight Lane from R15 Moderate Density Single Dwelling District to R7 CD Medium Density Single Dwelling Conditional District for a residential community containing 17 units. This was continued from our July 18th, 2023 meeting. And at this time, I'd like to recognize our city manager, Mr. Tony Caldwell. Mr. Caldwell.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
if I may, although I don't have a direct financial interest in this public hearing, I do have a close business relationship with the applicant and in the matter of the rezoning of property located at 5013, 5032, and 5034 Moonlight Lane. Based on City Code 8-29, State Law 160D-109A, I've been advised by Madam City Attorney that this constitutes a conflict of interest requiring me to be recused. So I therefore move that I be recused from voting and deliberating on this matter.
Okay, do we have a motion to recuse Mr. Waddell? We have a motion by Councilmember Rivenbark, second by Councilmember Anderson. Any further discussion? All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? You are now recused, Mr. Waddell. Thank you. This time I'd like to recognize City Manager. Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, and members of council. Nicole Smith, our senior planner, will overview this item.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. The proposal before you this evening includes one parcel containing approximately 2.54 acres. The site is located south of Moonlight Lane and north of Holly Tree Road. This map provides context and highlights the site location. The site is west of the signalized intersection at Pine Grove Drive. To the right of the slide are images of the subject site's existing conditions. This slide illustrates the existing development pattern within the vicinity. North, south, east, and west of the site is currently zoned R15, primarily containing residential and vacant properties. The proposal is adjacent to the city's Greenville Loop Trail, Section 1 capital improvement project, which was recently installed. The request before you this evening is to rezone the subject site from R15 Moderate Density Single Dwelling District to R7 CD Medium Density Single Dwelling Conditional District for a residential community containing 17 units. The development would feature 6 structures and would provide a variety of residential types, including 3 duplexes, 1 triplex, and 2 quadruplex structures. Lots 1 through 4 fronting Holly Tree Road would be rear-loaded units accessed off of the proposed alley. Lots 5 and 6 would be accessed off of a shared access easement. The development also preserves 32,232 square feet of open space, approximately 29.2% of the site, exceeding the R7 district requirements of 10%. The applicant is committed to the 2-story elevation shown on your screen and has identified potential building materials. Staff would like to update the anticipated transportation impacts outlined in Figure 3.5.3b of your case summary. The proposal results in approximately 2 to 3 additional trips during peak hours and 43 average weekday trips. The Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan calls for new development within established neighborhoods to address the existing distinctive character of the surrounding area while allowing for transitional change and context-sensitive infill development. The proposal results in the increase of 3 additional units compared to the maximum number of single-family homes and accessory dwelling units that could be developed under the current zoning. The proposed rezoning would result in a minimal increase in both AM and PM peak hour trips from the maximum number of single-family homes and accessory dwelling units. The proposed grouping of units results in the preservation of approximately 29.2% of the site for open space. Based on the information contained in the case summary and the Create Wilmington Comprehensive Plan, staff believes the request is reasonable and in the public interest and recommends conditional approval with the 8 conditions outlined in your case summary. The Planning Commission hosted a hearing on June 7th, 2023, in which no one spoke in support of the request. One individual spoke on behalf of the community in opposition to the request, citing concerns with density, traffic impacts, architectural materials, height, scale, drainage, access to Moonlight Lane, utility capacity, and compatible fencing and screening. Following discussion, the Planning Commission voted to recommend conditional approval and included some revised conditions. That concludes staff's presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions of staff? Mr. Anderson?
Was staff satisfied with the approval, the changes? Were you guys satisfied with the changes?
Sure. So as a result of the continuance granted by council at your July 18th meeting, the applicant did come back and commit to a 2-story elevation. The elevations that were presented to Planning Commission were optional 2-story or 3-story, with a caveat that they would have to satisfy the 35-foot maximum height capacity of the R7 district.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So, Mr. Anderson, you were next.
Nicole, on your, on the site plan, well, I'm going the wrong way, sorry, 2 seconds. On the site plan, tell me, what is it the city's requirements in terms of street yard, of the setbacks from Holly Tree? And what kind of street yard, plantings, or what they need to, what are they required to leave or plant back, and kind of what's the distance from I guess the street, or whether that'll be the path or what have you?
Sure. So you're asking 2 questions, so I'll address the setbacks first. There is a minimum 10-foot setback proposed for the R7 district, which would be comparative to the current R15 requirement of 20 feet. So the minimum setback would be 10 feet along Holly Tree Road. A streetscape would be required for this project, and that would require a minimum depth of 15 feet. Within that street yard, they would be required to plant 1 canopy tree, 5 understory trees, and 9 shrubs per 100 linear feet.
So maybe I just heard it wrong, but you've got a 10-foot setback, but you've got a 15-foot street yard. How does that work? Maybe I'm misunderstanding.
As shown on this plan, you would be held to the 15-foot street yard, and there are some proposals that would not have to provide a street yard as a result of the proposed development. In this circumstance, they would have to oblige by the 15-foot street yard and maintain the building structure outside of that minimum depth.
And that's off the path or off the street?
It's off of the property line, which would be off of the path. It's actually shown on the plan in front of you. It's a little difficult to see.
Yeah, that's the problem. It gets very granular. I can't read anything, but anyway. So 15 feet off, so that you'd have the street, the trail, and then 15 feet to the buildings.
Yes, sir.
The trail is, what, 10 feet?
Yes, sir.
Give or take on it, a little bit more on either side of it, probably. So, and then you'd have the street yard that you mentioned, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Rivenbark.
The building height for this, the maximum in R7 is 35 feet.
That's correct.
What is the building height maximum in R15?
35 feet as well.
It's also 35 feet?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
I have one more.
Ornette.
Go ahead.
Just again, a follow-up on that, the holly tree and the distance between the property at Holly Tree and where we're starting this project. You're telling me it's 15 feet away? I mean, because I've had a neighbor come to me and say that they're going to be right in my back door. What would you say to that?
I'm not sure what you're getting at. Off of Holly Tree Road, there's an estimated 10-foot
Talking to
multi-use
Mike
path.
a little more, too.
And then off of the 10-foot multi-use path, they would be responsible for a 15-foot streetscape, which would be required for the vegetation previously discussed. Off of that 15 feet, then they could build, but as shown on the site plan before you, there's some additional feet from the street yard to the actual setback of the proposed structures.
Okay, so it's not really right up against my,
Correct.
okay. All right.
Sorry, I
Go ahead.
went a little, got going too fast. On the backside of the backside of the property from Holly Tree here, is that also a 10-foot setback? Where shows lot 5 and 6 back there?
So there's a rear setback of 20 feet.
20, okay. It was outside our zoning map, the color-coded one with the Rs and everything, but if you don't have it, maybe sit down and look it up, but there's some townhomes that are a little west of the property, I guess. Right along there, I was curious what that zoning was. It looks like it's, from this map, it looks like it would be R50. Maybe it's on the other side of that road. I'll find the name of it, I'll get on Google. I'll ask later. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I want to ask Mr. Barnett's question a different way.
Sure.
You've got holly tree, curb, gutter, and then you have a 10-foot cross-city trail.
Yes, sir.
From that 10-foot, from the edge of that 10-foot away from the street, from there you start counting, and it's 15 feet before any construction can take place.
That's right. That would be the minimum depth of the required streetscape.
That's the minimum. Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. This time I'd like to recognize the applicant.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council members. My name is Sam Frank. I represent the applicant. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with you about this evening. And I would like to address those setbacks, the topic you were just discussing by question. I'll get to it when I've got that picture in front of me, if you'll bear with me that long. With me this evening are two representatives of the landowner who is also the applicant. That landowner entity is Moonlight Lane LLC. Owners of that company with me this evening are Evan Barton and Ross Tomaselli. If at any time you have questions you think better answered by the landowner than the lawyer, please don't hesitate to stop me. We also have our land planner, Josh Mahaley, and our civil engineer, Jeremy Blair. As Ms. Smith described, the subject site, 2.5 acres, located along Holly Tree and just to the south of an unimproved public right-of-way known as Moonlight Lane. Believe that the width of that unimproved right-of-way is 30 feet. As you can see from this picture, there is a higher density residential development along Holly Tree and adjacent, and then some more traditional single-family lots located off of the northwest corner and north of Moonlight that come near the property, as well as one that's located to the east. As you'll see in our revised site plan, we incorporated significant open space in that northwest corner, recognizing that was the closest proximity we had to any single-family residential, and also took into account and relied on that unimproved Moonlight Lane right-of-way as an additional source of buffering between these homes and the existing homes. The land is currently vacant and undeveloped. Surrounding zoning districts include primarily R15, also some R5, some R7, and some R10 in the immediate vicinity. This development approval will help facilitate a more efficient alternative housing option that is well-oriented to address the missing middle housing demand between multifamily and single-family homes. It's less expensive than a single-family home, more expensive than an apartment. As you're well aware, we need homes. The fundamental driver for the lack of affordability of housing in our county and in our city is driven by a lack of supply and an excess of demand. This is no mystery. The county did some good work over the last 2 years in a detailed study through Bowen as a consultant to evaluate exactly what those numbers look like. In a county that has approximately 100,000 homes, we need approximately 29,000 more homes to accommodate the people who live and work here today. That's not taking into account any future population growth. That's based solely on the needs of our community today. While this is one small step in connection with this zoning approval, it is an opportunity to deliver not only more homes to our community, but a greater diversity of homes to our community. We are overserved in the single-family home realm, at least proportionally, and underserved in the alternative versions of homes for our residents. It's just an orientation to give you a little bit of perspective on the location of the site along Holly Tree Road. Holly Tree Road, long-time part of the central Wilmington community, and some significant and interesting things along the road. We have a senior living facility. We have some variety in housing type. We've got an elementary school. Certainly an active and vibrant part of our city. Site plan, as it has evolved, is before you here. The site plan currently, or as it has evolved, contemplates 17 homes. We've adjusted it to incorporate a meaningful street curb appeal. So the buildings that are identified by lot number 1, lot number 2, lot number 3, and lot number 4 have homes that will face Holly Tree Road. They're also significantly set back from Holly Tree Road. And as you were discussing earlier, and as Ms. Smith effectively explained, you have a 10-foot multi-use path section along the edge of the right-of-way. Then working towards the homes, you have a 10-foot setback, but you also have a 15-foot streetscape requirement. And in this case, this is a conditional zoning. We're bound by the layout of the homes as they're shown on this conditional site plan. And the home that is closest to the edge of that multi-use path is the one shown at Lot 4. And the closest corner of that home to the multi-use path is about 20 feet. The other facades of the buildings are even further from that multi-use path. We did that in part to protect and hold on to some significant trees that exist in the southwest corner. So what's shown in dark green on this rendered site plan are existing trees, existing landscaping, and what's shown in light green is our vision for incorporation of those streetscape requirements that Ms. Smith alluded to earlier. We've got a single point of ingress and egress now that is aligned with Joy Place across the road. This is an evolved site plan that's the result of a collaborative effort with staff and with neighbors over the last 6 to 8 months. The result is a well-considered infill development that will offer a critical contribution to our need for a diversity of housing options in central Wilmington. This next image you saw in the staff report, but I wanted to mention it again. This is the elevation that is incorporated with our application. What that means is that it's also referenced in the conditions. One of the conditions of zoning is material compliance with the site plan and this elevation. We included a list of potential building materials. At this time, we haven't architecturally designed or priced out the buildings. We're not prepared to commit absolutely to one specific building material, but we are prepared to commit to a level of fit and finish as reflected by the potential materials listed here. Also prepared to commit to a 2-story elevation, as you can see before you. 4-foot maximum garden wall between the multi-use path and the yard in front of the homes. You can see depicted there as well. Now, in addition to this elevation that is part of the application and rolled into the conditions, we also wanted to offer some perspective for context. What is this going to look like walking down Holly Tree Road? The road kind of curves in this location, and so from no single vantage point on Holly Tree will you be able to see all of the homes on this property. And so the next 4 slides will take you on sort of a west to east journey across the site with the vantage point from Holly Tree. And so this first view is looking at lot number 1. You can see this demonstrates both the existing mature landscaping and the planned streetscape trees and the 2-story elevation. And again, for context, an example of what the exterior building materials could look like. As you move from west to east, this would be the vantage point of lot 2, the vantage point of lot 3, and the vantage point of lot 4 from the street. Traffic is always a consideration in connection with any rezoning in the city, always a topic of conversation. In this case, the traffic impact of what we propose compared to the traffic impact of what is permitted by right is negligible. Now, it's important for me to note that the chart that's on the screen now, that's in our presentation, is the one that was included in the staff report. And the one that Ms. Smith shared with you earlier is an updated version that I just learned about a few moments ago. I understand exactly why they changed it. The nuance is with the accessory dwelling units, the traffic count, I think, was a little bit too high on this one, and she adjusted that, and I have no reason to argue with that adjustment. The impact is negligible. Anyway, you look at it, you're talking about, on this chart, either a reduction in the number of trips at the tune of 1 car per 15 minutes, and on the chart, the updated chart that she shared with you, it'd be an increase of 1 car every 20 minutes. Holly Tree Road has a capacity of over 12,000 vehicles per day. It's currently operating at about 7,900 vehicles per day. So on a road that has additional capacity of more than 4,000 cars per day, the numbers that we're talking about, either on this one or the chart that Ms. Smith shared with you, are nominal. And the street is obviously well prepared to accommodate the additional traffic that will come from these new homes. Staff's recommendation, consistent with the Planning Commission recommendation, is sound. This is consistent with the comp plan. It's consistent with our future land use wishes. It aligns well with exactly what the city is trying to achieve on these infill development sites. Delivery of a diversity of housing options in a way that is attractive and takes advantage of an opportunity to be close to existing infrastructure. For all those reasons, we ask that you approve rezoning of this property to conditional R7 as proposed to you today. I'm eager to answer any questions you may have of us, and I'd also like to ask respectfully for the opportunity to speak with you again following any comments at the public hearing.
Mr. Frank, we have Mr. Spears.
2 questions.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned these homes being cheaper than what and more expensive than what?
They'd be less expensive than single-family homes and more expensive than typical rental apartments.
So it's still pretty expensive.
Well, yet to be determined. I guess we can all be grateful that construction costs are starting to level out. And so it's a little bit more predictable, but it's not predictable enough for me to be able to tell you what it will cost to deliver this product or what it will cost to acquire it 2 or 2.5 years from now when they finally reach the market.
But I just want to commend you. I did like the new spin you put on about affordable housing and what we needed in the community. So that was new for you. My other question is this: the accessory dwellings. I don't see any rendering. So are they attached or not attached?
No, sir. There's no accessory dwelling units contemplated with our conditional zoning. The traffic trip generation that was prepared by staff contemplated what could be done by right today, which would be 7 lots that have a single-family home and also an accessory dwelling structure.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Barnett?
Tell me again, because I've got some complaints about, like, the number of trees you're going to take down. Now, I heard you mention that you're saving, what, 29%? Or tell me that, give me some numbers on trees.
With your permission, Councilman Barnett, I'd like to invite our land planner to answer your question more accurately. if
No,
that would be all right.
I'm teasing, yeah. Yes,
Okay.
please.
Thank you. Mr. Josh Mahaley's here. I'll give him a second to walk up to the podium. And the image that's on your screen now is the site plan that shows both the trees that we intend to save and also the new ones we intend to plant. But let me allow Josh to elaborate on that.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council. I'm Josh Mahaley from Mahaley Land Design. We did a full tree survey on the project, as which required for their TRC application. I don't really have the numbers of exactly as far as how many trees are coming down or what, but what we did try to do is save a proportion of the trees that were the nicer trees on the site, and we had to save the significant specimen trees on the site. That large one shown over there next to Lot 6, that's actually a very large existing live oak tree, so we were able to work around that. There's some nice trees back there in that open space, and we saved that open space kind of to relate better to, from some of the comments from the community, but there is some very nice trees in there, and there's also some nice trees along Holly Tree, kind of in front of Lot 1 and 2. I'm not going to say there isn't other trees where the houses are going, but we did our best to try to work around the larger, more significant trees, especially the live oaks. So.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Anderson?
Mr. Frank, I have a little list here that I got in an email from some of the residents. I guess it sounded like they were having trouble getting clarity, so I thought I'd ask them for them.
Okay.
So the Moonlight Lane, that easement remains. It's not part of this.
Moonlight Lane is not part of this zoning, not part of the applicant's property.
I think coming out of the planning commission meeting, one of the conditions was to privacy fence, I believe, on the, I might not have my bearings right, but the northern side's Moonlight. Is that right?
I'm sorry, sir, I'm not following you.
It said northern and western in the conditions. There would be privacy fencing. I'm just trying to get it. Is that
Oh,
on
property
this side?
fence, yes, sir. No, the privacy fence would be along the northern boundary of this property, so
I understand.
between Moonlight Lane and this property.
That's what I'm asking. Is it
Yes,
up
sir.
there with Moonlight? And then the other side is over here to the west is to the left in this case, correct?
That's right.
Okay. They're asking about the elevation. You're leaving that open space elevation in that northwest corner. That was one of their requests, correct?
We are leaving that as open space and preserving landscaping on it as it is. I can't say for certain that there won't be any grading work related to the open space, but don't anticipate it.
Right. And
Grading work, sir?
you already mentioned the dwellings are 2 stories as committed to in the plan.
Yes, sir.
20, we looked at that one. Most of the, I guess at the end of the, I'll just say it, the elevations are not real impressive. They don't give us a lot to hang our hat on. And that corridor is very attractive at this point. I just don't know what we're getting. It looks like something, honestly, not to be super negative, but that I could draw. I just don't get a feel for what we're going to get. And I think it would have served you well to be a little more specific personally, but I don't know how others feel. But all right, thank you.
Here we have Mr. Rivenbark and then Mayor Pro Tem. Okay, Mayor Pro Tem. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask that you put the pictures back up, because we do better with pictures than we do with the words and the outline. But I
Yes,
think
ma'am, my
the
pleasure.
pictures you show, if you could go through those to the different lots that you had,
Sure.
Dylan, and show what those are, that certainly gives you an idea of, what it's going to look like.
We're doing the best we can. Yeah, I mean, there's always a challenge at the entitlement stage that we haven't completed architectural design to the level that it would be construction drawings. Can't afford to do that before the land is entitled to permit to build it. But we've done the best we could to show you from a concept standpoint and especially from a massing standpoint what these structures would look like along the streetscape.
Thank you.
Mr. Rivenbark?
Well, let's talk about that for a minute.
Yes,
We
sir.
get a lot of plans before us, Mr. Frank, that show what the finished product's going to look like. And I can't speak for everybody else out there or everybody up here, but I'm a very visual person. These plans are certainly necessary, the site plan, stormwater, everything that you're going to have to end up going to TRC with. But it's kind of like people talk about what all they want us to do, and you got to get elected first before you can sit up here and do this. And that holds true with, we're trying to get our head wrapped around what this is going to look like, because at the end of the day, if this were to be approved tonight, the final product is what everybody's going to have to look at for the next 50 years. And it's almost like buying a pig in a poke. That I see that picture, but there was one slide up here that showed a menu of different there you are. Painted cement board, anchor back. It's just, it's a menu, and I think that not just from where I sit, but I think a lot of these people out there would just have a little better degree of comfort if they could see what it's going to look like.
So, Councilman Rivenbark, I understand your point, of course. And I should note that up until about 3 months ago, maybe 6 months ago, in the city staff's review process of conditional zoning, we didn't incorporate the concept of elevations as part of the conditions. We, as applicants, would show you conceptual ideas, renderings, and say this is what we think it's going to look like in connection with the presentation. But those things weren't incorporated into the conditions that bound the landowner going forward. And now we do. Now we do incorporate a requirement that, or a strong suggestion, that applicants include an elevation as part of their submittal package in connection with conditional zoning. The reason for that, in our discussions with staff, has been explained to us that the goal is to understand massing. It's not about architectural control. The city's role is not to determine architectural details. The city's role is to determine whether or not a land use is appropriate on a particular piece of land.
Can I stop you right there real quick? I get that. I get that. Those folks out there, they expect us to do that part. They expect that to get done, and it gets done. But you know, we're not here to try to set the market or change the market or whatever. But I think that most of us up here are probably trying to figure out a way to make this happen and at the same time satisfy these 200 and some odd people that signed a petition. And that's sometimes can be the formula for failure, is trying to please everybody. But even though that's what the expectations are from where you stand, we're up here trying to help you sell it. And it makes it a little difficult to say, just, take those. It's like building your own salad at a restaurant. I'll take this, 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 and this. I think they just like to see a little bit stronger sense of what they can expect.
Yeah. So. Well, and we've done our best to walk that balance, to be as transparent as we can be, but also to be as candid as we can be about what we anticipate and what we can foresee. If we were to commit to a specific and expensive building material, or a set of expensive and building materials in connection with this, we would inherently be committing to deliver a more expensive product, which is inconsistent with the city's fundamental goal of providing a diversity of housing options. And we recognize that. We also recognize we don't know what the construction costs will be 12 months, 18 months from now, once we get the ball rolling. Also recognize that there is no architectural control on this property today. There are no restrictive covenants on this property today. There's no private contract that compels a particular architectural standard. Those houses, if we were to subdivide the land into 7 R15 lots, there would be no tree protection incorporated into that. You can tear whatever you want to down on a residential lot. You could build those homes 3 stories tall. They could be slab on grade with vinyl siding, completely unattractive. The things that we're proposing here on this elevation are specific architectural controls that are being incorporated into the conditional zoning that are above and beyond the controls that exist today. Now, would it be great if we could bring you fully designed architectural plans with a budget from the contractor, and we know that we can build this and commit to build it in exactly this way before we even know that the land's entitled to build it? Of course there's some appeal to that for us too. But the reality is we have to walk a balance between what level of detail we can realistically propose to you and what level of detail we can commit to at this time. Now that list of materials, you're right, it's a menu, but it's a list of high-end materials. I mean, we're talking about painted cement board, hardy board, stained wood, and or brick siding. And these are all 3 attractive options. Architectural shingles or metal roofing are both very attractive options for finishing the roofs of these buildings. And so, while yes, I acknowledge completely and have intentionally allowed some flexibility in what the final architectural details might be, we've tried hard to demonstrate that in a way that gives assurance both to you and to the people behind me that the level of fit and finish here will be commensurate with the neighborhood and attractive.
One thing further that you mentioned just now about what wouldn't have to be done under the existing zoning is also stormwater.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Frank.
I get the argument about what it's zoned as now, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about you're asking to change the zoning.
Yes, sir.
So we're asking you for comfort in doing so. I'm not asking you for architectural detail. I would never do that. That's up to you. That's why we want to see it. We don't want to comment and say you do this or you do that. I just want the comfort. I know this is not a special use permit, but two of those factors, as I recall, you'll know them better than me, but are what's it going to do to the property value of the surrounding neighborhood, and what's the fit? Mm-hmm. So those are two concerns for me here. We approve this, you go away and come back. We don't know what we're going to get. So that concerns me. Do you believe it will in any way hurt the property value of the surrounding neighborhood?
So I'm going to answer your question. It's a good question. I want to respond to it, but I want to say something responsive to the first part you said first. Yes, you're right. This is not a special use permit. And second, we are absolutely committing to a level of detail. That's what the site plan and the elevations contemplate. And third, in my experience, helping developers in the city of Wilmington, I have every reason to believe that this new construction will help the value of property. Now, I acknowledge completely that I'm not an appraiser.
No,
That's
I
not
understand
my expertise. But you asked my opinion.
Excuse me, wait a minute, excuse me, y'all.
What?
We're trying to obtain as much information as possible. We're listening to what this man has to say, and we'll be listening to each and every one of you. So please, I don't want to have to remove anybody from this chamber. Thank you.
I realize you're
You
not a
asked
real
my
estate
opinion
agent.
In my expertise,
I
I'm
understand.
sure.
Or an appraiser.
Yeah, fair enough. But you're right, we are asking you to change the zoning, and we are imposing pretty significant conditions on the way that land can be developed in connection with it. Now, that said, if there are other conditions beyond those that staff has recommended and that we've agreed to that you'd like to discuss, I'm certainly open-minded to do so.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Mr. Barnett?
I understand there's been a lot of collaboration with the neighbors.
Yes, sir.
Tell me a little bit more about some of the things that you've compromised on. Just give me a few of those.
I've got a slide on that if you'll bear with me for just a second. So, this was the original site plan, the 8 months ago site plan. 3-story buildings, 22 units, MD10 zoning was what we had originally contemplated. We had the backs of the buildings and the side of building 3 facing out towards Holly Tree. And as you can see, a component of the interior road would be visible from the Holly Tree frontage. Building 2 is also relatively close, relative to the nearby single-family home that's adjacent to the northwest corner of the site. Here's that original proposal next to the proposal that's in front of you now. As you can see, significant change to the layout of the site, orient the building so that the attractive side of the facade faces Holly Tree Road, incorporate open space in a meaningful way in the northwest corner to provide additional buffer, take full advantage of the extra 30 feet of buffer we have along the back with Moonlight Lane, reduce the number of units from 22 to 17, reduce the height of the buildings from 3-story down to 2-story. Let's see if there's anything else that I failed to mention that we arrived at. Yeah, and as Josh explained earlier, significantly we're able to save some more trees, and especially that one meaningful live oak in the center as a result of the revisions to the site plan. Those didn't happen all in one step. We had multiple community meetings. We've had multiple iterations of discussions with the staff. We even got some comments from the Planning Commission, even though they recommended approval. They provided some guidance as well. And so, like every good development project, engagement with the community and dialogue with staff has led us to a place where we believe that this is better than what we came up with in the first place. It's not a simple math game where we're disappointed that we lost 5 units. Quite the contrary. This is a better design than the one that we began with, which is the true value of community engagement.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Frank.
Thank you, sir.
This time I'm going to open up the public meeting. The public meeting or public comment portion will be set for 30 minutes. Madam Clerk will set the time. Each speaker will be allotted 3 minutes. And if you'll please state your name for the record and where you live.
Good evening. Appreciate your time and your attention. Mayor Pro Tem and City Council. My name is John Barry. I am a 31-year resident of Wilmington, 25 years at Windsor Estates, which actually backs up on the other side of the property, so the Moonlight Lane side of the property. Interesting the way the City Council meeting started. I spent 18 years at PPD. I would love to know what Dr. Eshelman's thought is now that the city owns the PPD Tower in downtown Wilmington. Great job there. I am here today not to represent just myself. I left my name off of this by design. I actually have the petition of the 250 or more people that have been represented by a variety of communities that are around this development. And if we could, I'm going to see if I can flip this slide. Yeah. So you can see the communities that are represented here. These are communities that go all the way up and down Holly Tree Road. And there's a number of different types of communities that are there. I want to acknowledge Wendy James. Wendy James actually is an old Camden, I believe, and she has done most of the legwork for this, so she's really done an awful lot of work. She unfortunately is not able to be here tonight because she is moving her son into Chapel Hill. I'd like to actually acknowledge Ross Tomaselli and his team. We've had a number of conversations with them. They've been very collegial, very collaborative. It actually has not been an adversarial type of discussion, although we are still at an impasse on a couple of things that we want to put in front of you today. It's, I think, a good example of how the community can come together and represent, a number of different people here. And, they've put their confidence in me to kind of state our case. We will see in a few minutes, I guess, whether or not that confidence is well placed. I hope it is. But we do have a number of people that, have started by opposing the rezoning altogether. And I think what we know is that we have a growing community. We do need to provide housing for the people that are moving into Wilmington. I've got 4 kids, all of whom are going to want to no longer live with dad, right? So they're going to need places to stay as well. So we know this is a problem. The point that we would make here is that we don't think that you're going to solve that problem on this 2.5 acres of land that sit, right off of Holly Tree Road. If I just kind of get you guys up to speed here, these are the changes. I know that people were asking before. These are the changes that have been made since the original proposal. We did have that community meeting. I was in that meeting. I will say it's an interesting negotiation tactic to start with 22 units and 3 stories, because I think that anchored it so far kind of out of the game that when they come down to 17, it becomes more realistic. I think that probably was a better starting point, 17 units and 2 stories. Really encouraged that they have accepted the 2 stories. That is a big change, and I want to acknowledge that. And again, this has been collaborative along the way. As you look at this table, you'll see the green arrows. The arrows actually indicate whether it went up or down or whether it stayed the same. The green represents from the community perspective as to whether it was a favorable change, and there were a number of favorable changes that were made after that initial proposal. The red arrows, or the red color, would indicate an unfavorable change, at least from the community's perspective. We had a number of meetings, and I want to appreciate the City Council, Charlie Rivenbark in particular, who met with us on July 13th. We also met with the Planning Commission. Shout out to Nicole Smith. She did fantastic. She's been very good at keeping us engaged and informed along the way. And we got some advice from the City Council then and the Planning Commission to go ahead and reach out to the developer. So we did that. We reached out to Ross and his team, asked if they'd like to get together for a lunch meeting and go over some of the concerns that we have. We sat on July 24th, I believe it was, and went over those concerns, and one of our actions walking out of that lunch meeting was for us to kind of memorialize the conditions that that we thought would be appropriate for us as a community to accept the planned development. And I think as you look through these, and Neil, you, I think, stole some of my thunder because that was my email from before. So I'm not going to go through all of these because a number of these have already been checked off. I think at the end of the day, we've got 3 sticking points, and that is on the number of units. We have a sticking point as to what the intended use is. We would love for these to be owner-occupied and not rental properties. And that doesn't mean that it can't be rented for Airbnb or VRBO. We are just wanting to make sure that this isn't going to be a community of rental properties, that this is actually going to be owner-occupied. And then we are very interested in what the selling price target is for this community because of all of the surrounding homes and the value of the homes that are around that. So if we think about where we are today, I've pointed that 6 of the 12 conditions that we asked the team, Ross and his team to consider, actually relate to the boundaries around the property, right? We want Moonlight Lane to stay as an easement. That is important because, I can tell you from experience that when Weston was built, that Moonlight Lane actually extended all the way behind Weston as well. And that developer petitioned to have Moonlight Lane actually closed, so it closed all the way up to where it ends now. It was actually good for me. It gifted 15 feet to me and 15 feet to that other development, but it did remove that easement. And so I don't back up on this property. The people who do have asked that we keep that easement in place, and I just knew that that was a potential, consideration that we wanted to just put on the table. 8-foot privacy fence around the northern and western borders. We've already got those checked. The big part for us is Holly Tree Road and how far back are these units going to sit. We're asking for a minimum of a 20-foot setback, and we're asking for, of that 20-foot setback, and that's from the trail end, the north end of the trail, so the first start of the property line. We're asking for that to be the first 10 feet of that 20-foot setback to essentially be a 10-foot easement that would be natural area and would not be able to be removed by the future owners, that they'd have to keep that as a natural area that would provide that kind of natural barrier between Holly Tree Road and these units. And it's kind of interesting that actually was a suggestion that Ross's team actually made to us at lunch. They said, look, if you have conditions you want to consider, here's how you might frame that one. And that was one that we would be very interested in. We also thought about that 4-foot barrier and just would suggest that we put a decorative metal fence on the other side of that 10-foot easement. So basically down the middle of that 20-foot setback, you would have that metal fence. And on the other side of the metal fence, between the fence and the unit, they would be able to plant and do whatever they wanted there, but they would at least have to protect that first 10 feet, and it wouldn't be able to be changed. If you got all those units on Holly Tree Road, you might have 11 or 12 different opinions around what to plant there, and it could be very disruptive. So we want to just make sure that stays consistent with what we see in Holly Tree Road. Again, unresolved conditions. The first condition would be to reduce the number of units. I think pictures say 1,000 words. When I put this unit or this development in with the neighboring community, so the Windsor Estates is to the north, you have Old Camden and a couple of the other communities are to the south. You've got Weston to the west. Weston actually, to me, is a good model for something to consider on this property. You can see how far back those units are set. There's 7 units in total on Weston. It's about 1.5 acres. If you were to use Weston as kind of the benchmark, it is zoned R15, but I would suggest that actually is developed more as an R10 type zoning. If you were to use that as your frame of reference, you'd put about 10 units on this property. You wouldn't put 17 on the property. 17 in our view is just way too many. If I think about the home ownership condition, I'll just give you some things that you already know, but right now we have over half of our communities are actually living in rental properties. They're not owning their homes, and that's compared to 34% of the overall U.S. household. So we need more homes for people to own. We don't need more homes for people to rent. We have a lot of apartments that are being built, so I know that those kinds of communities are happening. Oleander, just down the road, has a tremendous number of apartments that are going up right now on that old driving range next to the Moose Lodge. So I think the apartments are being taken care of. We need more homes for people to buy, and we do encourage the council to consider this to be owner-occupied units rather than establish it as a rental property itself. And then finally, if you think about the prices around all of this development, the lowest price you'll see is in the bottom center. It's $436,000 for one of those homes. Those homes are around 1,900 square feet. My understanding of these units is they're going to be around 1,800 square feet. When you go north of that 436 number, you can see that it just creeps up, and you've got, most of these are in the 470 or higher range. So we thought that a condition that said, look, let's build these to the quality of around a $450,000 house would make sense. So those are the conditions that we reviewed with the team. I will admit that I may have put Ross off a bit because when I sent these conditions to him, I sent them to him with an ask that he would put yes or no next to them, initial that, and sign. I think that may have frightened him away, so I apologize for that if that was the case. And I do want to acknowledge, this has been a collaborative experience with these guys. You know, there's an awful lot of people in the back that have some, real emotion around what's going to happen here, and we've been able to temper that all down and I think have a productive conversation with the developer. The big thing on the table for us is the number of units. Because you have 17 units, it is very close to Holly Tree Road, even 20 feet. If I think about how far I am away from you, Mr. Mayor, we're probably 20 feet away. That is not a long way from Holly Tree Road. And if you look at all the other developments on Holly Tree, there's nothing else that sits on Holly Tree Road that close. So I would ask for you to consider that. That is my talk for the evening, and I'll certainly open it up to others if there's time for others to offer their comments as well. Thank you.
Mr. Spears, do you have a question, sir?
Any questions?
Yes, sir. This probably won't be popular with this audience, but this picture and what you said in the past, I don't know, 6, 7, 8, 9 minutes, just screams entitlement to me, sir. I hear you saying development is fine, but not as long as it's around us. And I think that's the issue that we're having in Wilmington. You know, this governing body has to do one thing, and then we have to turn around and do something else. And it's based on the location. And so I understand, but it doesn't mean that I don't have a problem with it.
I understand. And that doesn't mean I don't have a problem with it either. I will tell you that you're not going to solve the entitlement problem with 2.5 acres in this community. I think that's a bigger issue that we need to consider.
You're right, but everything you've said is just, you said look at the prices, $476 and higher. Look at Weston. I mean, what's the lowest over there in Weston?
Weston, they're $520, $530 or more.
$498. That's the lowest. No, $493. That's the lowest over there. So you're saying that should be the standard for
I'm
what
just
you
saying
for what
that
you
if
want to
you're-
see in your community. That's the standard for what you want to see in your community, right?
I'm saying that should be the standard for what's in this community, because that is what's in this community.
Are we not saying the same thing? Is that not the same thing?
Well, I think that there is a implied bias that you're ascribing to me that I'm going to disagree with. I think that there's a 2.5 acre piece of property right here that's right in the middle of a number of homes that are priced at that range. I didn't set that price. I bought my home 25 years ago for $200,000. I've been there for a long time. We've done a lot of improvements. I don't think that's entitled.
So now you want 7 more homes that are $500,000 next to you.
I'm sorry?
7 more homes starting at $500,000 on the lot next to you that's available. That's
Well,
what
I
you're
think
saying.
that what I would like to see are homes that are consistent with the homes that are already priced in this community.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. I would be happy to talk about, the entitlement problem and how we solve that for Wilmington. I mean, that's an important problem. I don't think this is where we solve it. No.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Thanks.
Next. Anybody else? Anybody else want to speak? Or is Mr. Perry going to speak? Everybody? Okay. Mr. Frank, did you want to rebut?
Yeah, I'd like to hear from him.
Do you mind pulling our presentation back up? Thank you, sir. Good evening. Thank you again for opportunity. I'll be relatively brief here. A couple fact points I want to make with regard to this site layout. That multi-use path is on the north side of Holly Tree. And so the closest proximity of any of these buildings to the edge of the right-of-way for Holly Tree is 30 feet, that corner at Lot 4. All of the other buildings are even further from Holly Tree than that. In the satellite image that Mr. Berry shared with you, it's obvious that the single-family homes on the other side of Holly Tree are within that 30 feet. This is consistent and similar. That multi-use path provides a nice buffer. It's in addition to the street yard requirements, the multi-use path helps contribute to the overall curb appeal of the design without a doubt. Same thing happens on the backside. You've got 20-foot setback behind Lot 5 and Lot 6, and then you have a 30-foot unimproved public right-of-way that provides a 50-foot buffer between the buildings on this site plan and the next closest property line, let alone the next closest house on the north side of this development. Really significant cushion and buffering. A lot of thought has gone into this site plan to incorporate, take advantage of those things, and isolate whatever impact there might be that's negative for somebody who lives in a single-family home and doesn't want to live next to a townhome. The conditions, as Mr. Berry described them, that he proposed are requests from private citizens that we further adapt this proposed development. Many of those concepts are addressed in the conditions that have already been agreed upon with staff. The concept of a privacy fence along the northern and western side is addressed. Two-story buildings are addressed. The concept of a privacy fence, a garden wall, not a privacy fence, garden wall along the streetscape edge is addressed. Some of the concepts that have been raised by Mr. Berry are things that you cannot incorporate as a condition and we cannot agree to. We can't agree to limitations on occupancy as a condition of zoning. We can't agree to prices for houses as a condition of zoning. And it would be disingenuous for us to agree to do something that is illegal and couldn't be binding on us anyway, and therefore we've politely declined to do so. Councilman Spears, you're exactly right. We hear it time and again. This is exactly what our community needs. We need a diversity of housing options. We need to incorporate organically more affordable housing, and we need more homes. And then you hear the people who live immediately adjacent to it say, I just don't want it in my backyard. A petition signed by 250 people is representative of about 0.2% of the citizens of Wilmington. That's a good number of people, but it also is not representative of the needs of this entire community. And we rely on and appreciate that you're here to make decisions in the best interest of the entire Wilmington community. Believe that staff has come to the right conclusion, that this proposal does just that, and that the Planning Commission's recommendation endorses it. That said, if you have any further questions for us, I do want to offer something that I didn't think to offer previously. That is that our architect is here. And I apologize, Councilman Anderson, I didn't think about that either in my introduction or when I was responding to your questions. But if you want to get more detail about just how far we have gone with our conceptual design or the reasons for the layout of the conceptual design, I'm more than happy to invite our architect to answer those questions.
Mr. Ambar.
Thank you for your presentation. It was very, very well done. We do have, a lot of people here in the audience tonight, but I could assure you that once this item is finished, 70% of the people in the audience will get up and go. And we have another public hearing right behind this that deals with land use. So it's for 22 years I've been doing this, and people are very particular about what goes on right around them. But when I look out there, I have to also think about the other 150,000 people that I was elected to represent, and not just the 257 that are on that petition. Do I take it serious? Very. The one thing that I believe that I've read and people I've talked to is, and I get this, what I'm getting ready to say, they don't want it to become a rental village. And I know that I've talked with Ross early on, these are going to be for sale. And anybody out there that lives in Weston or Windsor Estates or Warlick Estates, any of them, they could rent their house. There's no law that says you can't, and I realize that can't be a condition to zoning. So I get those things, but we're just up here, you know, trying to figure out how to award the baby to the right mother instead of cutting it in half. So it's a balancing act, and we're just trying to do the best we can. But I would appreciate the architect coming up and let's just hearing what he has to say.
Absolutely. Let me invite Fred Belladin to come and speak. And if you have specific questions for him, please ask. While he's walking this way, I'll echo what you just said, which is it's this developer's intention to offer these townhomes for sale. While we recognize we can't incorporate that as a condition, we can candidly tell you what we think we're going to do.
In doing so, the market always, I'm a firm believer that the market takes care of itself. It just always
Absolutely.
has, and it always will. So
I couldn't agree with you more. Yes, sir. Fred.
Good evening. My name is Fred Belladin. I'm with Clearscapes Art and Architecture. And we've been working with Ross on a couple of other projects that are in design. And at this point in time, we've simply helped kind of assist with the overall massing and what it could be. So are there any specific questions that you would like me to address?
I don't know the answers, and at this point, I don't know the questions. But I thought maybe you would maybe shed a little light on what your druthers were. And you have to, and I'm in the real estate business, and I know that estimates and what appraisals are only good for the shelf life is very short.
Right.
And then we still are having some issues with supply chain. I get all that. So I guess I don't have any questions for you. I thought if anybody else may want to talk to the architect.
Yeah, I guess the assurance that I would probably want to hear, and I guess it says that in the type of material that you're going to use, but you're not going to put up, how can I say it, junk? You know, I mean, tell me about that. Give me.
It's a fair question, and Commissioner Rivenbark, I think you touched on part of the challenges we all face in working back and forth between a pre-entitlement process and a full design process. So what we showed were two different elevation types. The first black and white one that was commented on was strictly to reinforce that we are looking at two-story volumes with gable roofs to be consistent in scale with the overall neighborhood as it exists today and with the overall roof typologies. The materials that we've listed, as you said, we work with a lot of municipalities, and I'll be honest, it's very, very rare in most municipalities to show detailed renderings or elevations unless you're proposing something very extreme in comparison to what the underlying zoning is. This is such a modest ask in terms of the increase in density of 3 units, and we're actually overcommitting to a lower height with the 2 stories than we could achieve otherwise, and we're committing to quality materials that are found throughout the surrounding neighborhoods. So it is clear that you're looking at a menu there. The colored rendering shows a suggestion of what it may be. You know, one of the options, they may be entire brick facades. This image shows a partial brick facade and a partial sided facade. All of these precedents exist within the surrounding neighborhoods. So all we're trying to do at this stage is preserve some flexibility to address changes in material availability, changes in escalation, but deliver the same quality product with the same materials that are already found within the surrounding neighborhoods and at a scale and with an overall building form that is consistent with what's found in the surrounding neighborhoods.
Thank you.
Mr. Rivenbark.
As does everybody, you've got to get your return on your investment. And I don't know what the land cost is in this, don't care. But in order to get your decent return, you've got to build something nice. I mean, there's just no two ways about that. And there again, we can't dictate that to you tonight, that you've got to use all brick. I mean, that's basically what's out there, is all brick. But to address what Clifford Barnett just said, I know darn well there's not going to be any junk thrown up. It's going to have to be nice. Otherwise, you're sitting there with a product that you're ashamed of. And these guys are local. They didn't come in here from Mars and build this and they're taking their money and run. they're young, and they're going to be continuing to do business. So I don't see that as a possibility. I just wanted to reiterate that sometimes it makes it easier for us to be able to embrace something if we can kind of have a little more concrete picture. You get what I'm saying, Mr. Belden?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
as an architect, I'd like to reinforce your comment as well. We're very selective with the developers we work with because we are committed to doing community-driven work. I think you'll see that if you look at our website. And one of the reasons we're excited to work with Ross and Evan is because clearly with the conversations they've had with the community to date, they are working very hard to work collaboratively with the communities they work in to deliver housing options that are contextually consistent with the neighborhoods and also provide good housing options for your community.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions? Any other comments?
Thank you, sir. I'm nearby. Should any arise during your discussion, if you'd like me to come back up, please just ask.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask one more time, since the public hearing is still open, if anybody has anything else to say before I close it. Okay. Okay. Madam Clerk, have you received any additional commentary?
No, sir, I did not receive any additional comments. However, there's a gentleman in the audience that said he sent council a letter, but I did not get a copy of it, so I cannot put it into the record. The only thing I said is if he wanted to make it known on what his opposition was, he would have to put it into the record in person. Thank you.
Yes, he would.
Hello, my name is Albert Wagner. I am in Holly Downs, and I've walked by the development area a few times, and you look at the new path they just put in there, and there is an elevation drop of about 5 or 6 feet. So everything I've seen in the diagrams show things at street level. I have problems realizing the traffic in and out, with 17 units being less than 4 or 5 houses. The number of cars going in and out, those numbers, I just have trouble rationalizing. If you're putting 17 houses in there, 1 or 2 cars per house, and you're comparing that to more spread out single dwelling homes and saying that you get more traffic in and out of the single housing homes than the townhouses, those don't make sense. So I just have trouble rationalizing those numbers. So those are the concerns I have, and then the runoff and stuff like that for the neighbors. But thank you for listening.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, City Council. I've never had to appear like this before you before, so I'm a little nervous. I wrote a letter to City Council about the rail train blocking our traffic, and I sent it to all of you, and the only council member that responded to me was Neil Anderson. And he said that we've been spinning our wheels for years on this. And I said to him to call Pete Buttigieg, if I say his name right, Secretary of Transportation, and to get his butt down here to fix our transportation issue with our rail realignment. And I want the most fantastic bridge built better than the one in Charleston, South Carolina.
Sir, excuse me, this is a public hearing about this particular development. What you're talking about is rail realignment, and we're not talking about rail realignment right now. So I'm sorry, we're talking about this particular project. We're not talking about rail realignment.
This all comes together because I have been misused, abused by the Wilmington Police Department.
Sir, I'm sorry. This is about this particular, I'm going to have to cut the mic. Who wants to speak on the subject matter? Okay. Any additional questions from council? Okay. I'm going to close the public hearing and ask for the wishes of council. We have a motion to approve by Mayor Pro Tem Haynes. We have a second to that. Second by Councilmember Rivenbark. And I will also ask that Mrs. Haynes read a consistency statement for the record.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to approve the proposed amendment to assign zoning to property located at 5030, 5032, and 5034 Moonlight Lane from R15 Moderate Density Single Dwelling District to R7 CD Medium Density Single Dwelling Conditional District for 17-unit residential development, and I find it to be consistent with the relevant policies in the comprehensive plan based on the application materials and the information provided at the public hearing and in the staff report, and to find approval of the rezoning request is reasonable and in the public interest for the following reasons. The proposed rezoning would allow for context-sensitive infill that is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood.
Okay. Discussion. Mr. Anderson?
Well, I would first just appreciate the collaboration. This kind of worked the way we hope it will, and the way it's kind of designed, neighborhood organized. They the developer collaborated with them to some degree. You don't always get everything, neither one, hopefully there's some give and take, and I feel like there was here. Some nice buffering with these open space they've left. I think it's right at almost 30% open space, and leaving the easement in the back adds more buffering. And then they're doing the fences on two sides of the property and the garden wall on the third. So I think those are all positive developments that have come out of this. The other part is it's just over a third impermeable, so the stormwater situation should be something they can manage pretty good. The height and scale fits. I believe I was going to call it a pitched roof, but gabled roofs, whatever it's called, and I think is appropriate for the area. And I think the fact that these are for sale, Charlie kind of hit on it already. The market will drive it to be the most it can be, the best it can be in that neighborhood for whatever they've paid for that piece of land. So it's going to end up being, if it's too close to the street and there's not enough buffer, who's going to want to buy it? If the architecture and the construction materials are not quality, who's going to pay that much for it? The market's going to drive it. So I guess those are my comments. Thanks.
I realize that everybody don't always get everything you want. I think sometimes there's a happy medium. We don't always up here get everything that we would like to see incorporated into the plan simply because it can't be. So and then in addition to that, we have to put faith in our people that come before us that are developing the city. And we've had some good ones and we've had some dillies, and the dillies don't last. I have faith in what these guys will do. I've worked with Mr. Tomaselli's dad. He's a terrific developer, and I trust that young Ross is going to come along and do and act accordingly the same way. So with that, I realize that what we're doing here tonight, time will tell, and I feel like we're right. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I'm torn, and the only reason I'm torn is because I actually live in that neighborhood, okay? And it's a great project. I really think it's a great project. I commend you on it. I like the idea of providing housing for people who want just a little more than an apartment. I agree with you on that. I think it's a great site, and I do, along with Councilman Neal, appreciate the collaboration that you've shared with the community and you've shared with my neighbors. So I appreciate that. Okay, but I'm going to vote nay only because I just want the neighborhood to know that we hear you. Okay.
Okay, all in favor of the vote, please indicate by saying aye. Okay, it passes 5-1. Is there a motion to waive second reading? Motion made by Councilmember Rivenbark, second by Councilmember Barnett. Discussion, all in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item passes unanimously. That brings us to our next item of business, which is item PH2, which is an ordinance amending the official zoning maps of the city to rezone property containing 8.7 acres of land located at 2231 One Tree Hill Way from LI Light Industrial to MHCD Manufactured Housing Conditional District for recreational vehicle campground. At this time, I'd like to recognize our city manager, Mr. Tony Cottle. Mr. Cottle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Brian Chambers, our Assistant Director of Planning and Development, will overview this item for us.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members pro tem, members of council. This item was continued from the 18th to allow time for the applicant to modify, to adjust their site designs based on the feedback they received at that time. I'm not going to go through the entire presentation, but there are a few things I want to cover just to remind everybody, refresh your memory, and then I'll turn it over to the applicant to share her updates. Again, this site is located on the west side of 23rd Street, One Tree Hill Road. The applicant is proposing to rezone the site from light industrial to a manufactured housing conditional district for a recreational vehicle campground. The campground consists of 50 pads and 3 structures. This includes a management office with retail store, a bathhouse, and a maintenance shed. We did receive a proposed pad layout in advance of the meeting. This was included in your packet and also included as an attachment. And this was mentioned at the last meeting. There's a proposed change to condition number 5. What is shown on the top line is what Planning Commission adopted. There were some discussions after Planning Commission, and the applicant has requested, and I think staff would agree if you end up approving this, the modification to condition 5, and this would be consistent with similar conditions that we've approved on other projects, just to make the language consistent. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Are there any questions for staff? Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
This time, I'd like to recognize the applicant.
Thank you very much. I'm Cindy Wolf, and we appreciate the staff's recap. And we very much appreciate the opportunity to provide the additional dialogue and answers to your previous questions about the project proposal for an upscale RV and travel trailer resort. This is an artist's rendering of the park entry building, which would include the welcome center, the offices, a general store, and other amenities of the park that we'll elaborate on shortly. Jeff Boughton and I are here. He and his partners did not go into this venture without a lot of research and attention to detail. There are industry standards and other avenues of information on what has become an extremely popular means of travel. There are 3 classes of RVs and varying lengths of travel trailers. The pads we've shown in the concept layout are all based on the maximum size criteria of what is out there in the industry. But there will be a determination of a mix of expected patronage. There's no reason to make all of them the maximum size, but as we're site planning, we've got to make sure that we're covering, because of conditional districts, what we potentially can develop. Beyond that, otherwise, we have to come back before you as a major modification of something. So with the pads we've shown, based on that size criteria, the determination and mix of the patronage will allow reduction of some of the pad lengths during detailed design. But this layout and sizing and spatial arrangement is typical, with each lot being 30, basically, if you look at these pads as lots, they are 30-foot wide and of varying depth. The parking pad for the vehicle is 14-foot wide to allow for that 8.5-foot vehicle. That is the maximum size of vehicles of any of these sorts of RVs and trailers. It allows for the side mirrors, and it allows for an interior living space bump outs. I'm sure you're all aware of the types of RVs that have the bump outs for the kitchen or for the dining room. Each pad then has an additional 10-foot side patio for the grill, the table, the fire pit, the types of amenities that will be part of this project. Parking for a towed personal vehicle or guest is also provided at every pad. This is a rendering a little bit closer of how the layout works. Hookups are on the driver's side of the vehicle, but all of the activity is on the passenger side where the entry door is. So not only plantings, but the vehicle itself provides the visual screening and separation and privacy between each adjacent pad. This is the January 2023 aerial photo of the tract. The upland development area of the total tract is roughly 8.7 acres, and there will be a buffer along that boundary. This project is not impacting any wetlands whatsoever. There seemed to be a concern raised about the density of the park, and I just wanted to bring up, as a comparison, the maximum of 50 potential pads over this acreage calculates to 6.8 units an acre. That is no more dense than R7 in a subdivision, and certainly not even R5. This is a little bit more telling view of the conceptual layout. Definitely, artist rendering like this make a project like this infinitely more visible to the layperson. But it's not always possible to do, and I apologize, we weren't prepared for that type of detail at the first meeting. This aerial view of the existing trees within the marsh was created from those aerial photographs. So these, what you're seeing beyond the limits of the park itself, are in fact mature vegetation that will remain after the development because it is beyond the wetland and the marsh. The proposed resort can emphasize natural landscape and preserve more trees than probably any other use for this site. As I mentioned previously, a project such as this is created more out in the field than on the drafting table because of the nature of it. You get in there with your contractor, your engineer, you walk around, you identify specific trees, and you work within that area. Natural open spaces have also been provided throughout the park, and we've already investigated spading and relocating trees when feasible. The impervious coverage of this within that usable area is only 30% of that acreage. And again, no disturbance beyond that boundary or permitting for any wetland fill. What will make Studio Park RV Resort first class is ultimately the quality of the facilities, the amenities, and the aesthetics provided for guests. Star ratings distinguish between campgrounds, RV parks, and RV resorts, which is what this will be. Good Sam membership is well known in the RVing community. It has a triple rating system with less than 1% of the 2,000 plus parks in the network actually reaching that prestigious 10-10-10 rating across all three categories. Reviews are annual, and this studio park intends to carry that designation. There'll be a swimming pool, there'll be outdoor communal areas. Along with the general store for necessities and sundries, the Welcome Center will have a gym, a business hub, and indoor recreation opportunities. A big part of this project is its unique location, and the beautiful views of the marshland and Smith Creek are a huge asset to the project. A raised walk over the marsh to an overlook platform and access for kayaks is also planned. The other prevailing comments were directed towards any impacts to views from the parkway. And Jeff did a yeoman's job here at going out there onto the parkway and interior and providing these next couple of slides showing that there would be very little to no views compromised to or from the site. Just here, you can see from those locations at 1 through 5, what you're looking at towards Martin Luther King. Everything on view number 2 to the left is part of that wetland marsh, so that doesn't get taken out. Just some other views. And here at 5B, you're looking over towards Martin Luther King, and you can barely see one of the bridges over the marsh there. This is from the reverse. This is from Martin Luther King looking towards it, and you can identify the CFPUA pump station right there. And all of those trees that you're seeing in the background are at the edge of the marsh. Again, number 7. You can barely see anything, and certainly you're going 50 miles an hour as you're doing it. With that, the assets of this project are certainly its location convenient to both downtown and Wrightsville Beach. Regardless of what's convenient outside the park, the excellent amenities which are offered inside the park. And it is a use that doesn't exist in our community for RV enthusiasts looking for a first-class lodging experience while traveling. In summary, we believe our area is extremely popular vacation destination. Tourism is absolutely a huge benefit to our economy. This proposal provides an excellent opportunity to expand recreational uses for the city's tourism industry and will be an asset to the overall county and immediate surrounding community. This project does promote objectives and goals of the overall Create Wilmington plan to keep the city a vibrant, prosperous, and diverse coastal community. Jeff and I are happy to answer any questions you may still have.
Mr. Barnett?
Hi, Cindy. 2 questions. Number 1, where is the nearest resort park like this to us?
We have the KOA, which is up in Ogden. They're at Carolina Beach State Park. There is a campground. Beyond that, I'm not aware. Well,
Okay.
At Snow's Cut, there is a combination RV transitioning mobile home park along River Road.
Okay. The second question I have is, someone wrote us last week, and they said something about, like, the RV parks do a lot of damage to the environment.
I don't know where, I was
remember
also
seeing that?
received a copy of
Okay.
that. I don't know where that research was done, but if you consider the location of this and the fact that it is currently zoned industrial, I'd venture to say that any industrial development would probably tamp down more ground, take out more trees, and, you know, there's always questions with that. The site beside this is, in fact, I believe what they call a Phase 1 site. There are monitoring wells because in the past, there was an industry that dumped things. And
Right.
so I don't know, comparing apples to oranges or apples to apples, I don't know where her research came from, but they are regulated through the health department if they have septic systems. In this particular case, will be on public sewer and water. So it's no different than a residential subdivision as far as those types of things that she outlined. It still has to have stormwater management. We are not filling any wetlands or trying to permit anything away. We're on public utilities.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Anderson?
Ms. Wolf, on, I'm looking at, I guess, the old, do you have an overhead? I'm looking at the old overhead, maybe the same one you have now.
Well, I mean,
Our work is it's just positioned differently. In this, your prior drawing.
right.
You know-
That's my version of
Okay,
a
well,
planometric.
Let's call it I guess that's the eastern side of the property, which I guess towards 23rd?
That's correct,
Towards
yes.
23rd. What's the buffer, which here is really where we're looking at it from, so what's the buffer at these spaces that are at the bottom left of your picture to the property line? there to the right, like,
Okay, off to the right. There is a 100-foot tract that has the monitoring wells on it. It is a vacant tract, and the next thing over are the businesses along 23rd Street.
the track with the monitoring wells is owned by whom?
Mr. Hendricks, I believe, owns it. It's a vacant tract.
But I'm just saying, what's the buffer in this, whatever zoning this, I mean,
The manufactured housing park doesn't have required buffers against industrially zoned property.
so it could be right up against it?
Yes.
'Cause I mean, that's what it looks like, so I thought that, so,
Let's see,
okay.
we've got one. I mean, in my layout, the pads, if in fact they all are 50-foot, are 10-foot off the line. I did not take the pads all the way up to the line, I believe, on your
Okay.
exhibit that you are looking at.
And I went out there yesterday and drove that whole little road, and just to get a real good feel for what I could see, and I did not do it from the opposite direction, but you sure can't see MLK very well at all from any of the spots. So you're saying that whole tree line down by the marsh is basically untouchable?
That's correct.
And what about the tree line up on one tree hall? There's some nice hardwoods in there. I mean, I was kind of surprised, to be honest with you, but I guess that's why they hadn't been knocked down. It looks like you're taking a lot of that down. Is that right? Like right where we're looking right now? There's no buffer. There's no buffer there either.
There's a grove right there. Those are existing trees that are there on the left-hand side, close to the maintenance shed. Along the main street, again, we've got about I think it's a 20-foot setback of the pads, so there'll be at least 20 foot in there. We will have to install a sidewalk, but that is along the right-of-way line. So I believe
I would
what
think
you're
you would want to
seeing
leave
is
the buffer,
the
but-
fence is at the 20-foot line.
Okay.
And there's no reason for us to remove any existing vegetation other than selective underbrush, just because it's vines and weeds.
And is there a street yard component in this zone?
Yes. And the street yard component would be the normal calculations that Nicole pointed out earlier, which is 1 tree and, I believe, 8 shrubs per 100 linear feet. There's a calculation that all goes into that street yard.
And I assume these two gray, these pools look like, those are stormwater ponds?
Stormwater ponds, yes.
Okay. And I guess I'm warmed up to this project a lot, but I go back to what's your commitment to working around trees here? Are we going to try to work around some of them?
Absolutely. Any trees that are significant have to be mitigated, so there's a cost involved in there, absolutely. The quality and the aesthetics of a park like this are to have the trees in here. We started with an arborist to make sure to go in there, and there were no specimen trees identified, no longleafs, no live oaks within the development area whatsoever, so we tied that down. Then you have to also understand that everything else, again, at this stage of the process, is the surveyors that have been out there, and they've eyeballed the caliper of the trees, and they said, well, it looks like a magnolia. I've had a project where every magnolia they showed was a black gum. So all of those things, we have the arborist engaged. At this stage, upon positive entitlement, we get the arborist to go out there and start looking at specific trees. Can some of them be spayed and moved? Can they be saved because of the grading of the pads? So there's a lot that goes into the detailed design and permitting, and the TRC is very diligent in making sure that any trees that are not affected by essential site improvements are preserved.
Yeah, I guess what I see here is, you talk about essential site improvements. It's a little different creature, could you move a pad a little bit to accommodate a tree?
Absolutely.
Versus
And keep in
a
mind that
building.
the trees on the plans that I present are all of the regulated trees. There are lots of smaller trees in there too, and there's no reason why they can't be saved because the canopies aren't affected by things like this, the travel drive or the pads.
Because my real only concern here is that you just create a bald hill there and a bunch of campers on it. I mean, that's my greatest fear.
And that is not the intent. It would not be productive. And the fact that TRC monitors it, and to be that quality class of resort that they're looking for, they'd be replanting if so.
Thank you.
Mr. Waddell.
Thank you. Ms. Wolf, I know you were tasked with bringing some visuals, and these are certainly great visuals, and appreciate you doing so, but do you have a copy of the actual site plan that we're voting on? Is that in this packet anywhere?
It is not any longer. It is in the,
Do we have it in the staff's report, possibly? Sorry to be difficult, but that's what we're voting on. So.
that rendering was created from the site plan. So everything, they were able with the CAD drawing to create it in 3D. So just so.
Well, while it's getting pulled up, I appreciate also the reference to the 30-foot. So each pad, not pad as in the concrete pad, but each, let's call it a lot, for lack of a better term, will be 30-foot by 50-foot?
That is correct.
Okay, all right. That's helpful. And I appreciate you calling that out, because the 14-foot is just the actual concrete pad.
For the vehicle itself.
But
Then
the
there is
actual
more.
lot will be 30
Correct.
foot. And that's across the board, or that's the maximum size?
No, every pad is 30-foot wide. They aren't all 50-foot
Sure.
deep.
That's not as big an issue. Okay, well, that's a major hurdle. And then there was reference to a walkway that, like, around the.
Yeah,
like,
that
as a-
hasn't been identified where yet.
So
but
is that a condition in the?
Yes, the staff, we signed off on a condition that we will provide kayak access.
There was in the visual, there was like a walkway. It kind of looked like the
Yeah,
river
now that
walk.
was from River Lights, and obviously that
Okay.
was much more expansive than what would be here.
So there'll be a
But
kayak launch.
yes.
Okay.
The intent is to build a raised platform to get out from the site, probably more perpendicular than that is a river walk, if you will.
Sure.
But it would access then a kayak launch and like a viewing platform.
Okay.
That has to be coordinated through CAMA and everyone else.
And then finally, but with the 30-foot lots, they can't be shown on the site plan because, like, they're not shown here.
Well, until these are actually created, I'd say no, but there's no reason to create lots
Right.
per se.
I understand
but-
that. That's what makes it difficult, because it looks like in the visual, when I'm looking at the actual site plan, like there's just no way that that's 30 feet.
Each of those 14 plus 10, so 24-foot pads, as far as the width of the combination of the parking pad
And you got
and
3
the
foot on either
patio
side.
pad, are 6 feet from the next one.
Tracking, okay. And then finally, this may just be education to me, as I don't quite, I'm still wrapping my head around this project, but if the market were to change and it was difficult to have, short-term rental on these sites, what's keeping it from effectively becoming a mobile home park?
This approval, because of the conditions and the plan that has been presented, that would constitute a major modification of any approval, and we would have to
So
revisit.
is there a maximum stay?
Yes. Although we intend for this to be an RV and trailer resort
Sure.
only, it is considered by the code as a campground, and yes, the prescribed conditions of campgrounds are a maximum of 29 days.
Maximum of 29 days. And then, so somebody stays for 29 days, and this may be a question for staff. Somebody stays for 29 days, they drive to Walmart and park for the night, and then they come back. Is that, they're all well within the confines of the code at that point, or?
I'd have to defer to someone else. It would be a compliance.
Sure.
If,
We don't have any of these in the city,
I know.
so this would be a new enforcement action that we'd have to undertake. I honestly don't know. I'd have to talk to our zoning staff as to how that would be interpreted, but I would think that they would have to leave the site and come back to restart the clock. The length of time in between that, I don't know that that's something we could establish.
But if there was, not saying it would happen here, but we may see more of these come up as, you know, this is the hot new thing now. So if we do start seeing more of these come up, would that just fall on code enforcement then if we were starting to get complaints that there was somebody there for 30, 60, 90 days? That
Correct.
code enforcement would then,
Yes, it would be an enforcement action, and I think the idea is just, we don't want these to be permanent structures.
Right.
So we would be able to recognize that, yeah, that's been there a while, they start building things on and stuff like that.
okay, all right, that's it for now, thank you.
Sorry, Mrs. Spears?
Can we go back to the rendering? The new one? Cindy, I just want to say this is beautiful. I mean, it looks like an island.
It makes a huge difference, being able to have that three-dimensional view.
It doesn't even look like it's between 23rd Street and One Tree Hill and MLK. I mean, look at that blue water. Is that a mountain in there?
I'm not so sure that
There's a
Smith
mountain.
Creek is quite that color, but
There's a mountain.
it is a beautiful sight.
There's a mountain there. And, I mean, for those of us who drive this street, we do know One Tree Hill is not that smooth. And we can't even see the pump house that's to the left. I mean, this is a beautiful optical illusion. Yeah, you can't see it.
It's to the side of the Welcome Center, obviously.
Yeah, but I mean, how does it fit in? Doesn't fit in. Does it fit in? I mean, because
It's not near where the RVs and trailers are. That's why we use that separation. In addition to the power lines, we obviously had to work around those.
yeah, I mean, that's beautiful. That's whoever did that. That's some nice work. That's really nice work. I mean, you gonna contribute to the paving of One Tree Hill Way?
One Tree Hill Way is a city-maintained road. It
So-
is adequately sized for the traffic that is on it.
No. Not if you bring in a RV resort. Is not.
I would
You
prefer
can't. You can't get two regular cars to come down One Tree Hill at the same time. You can't.
I've been out there. I mean, it is an 18 to 24-foot pavement cross-section.
No lines. Doesn't look as nice as that. I mean, and one more thing. I was gonna be quiet, but I was triggered. And there was another slide that says this promotes economic development and prosperity or something, right?
Yes? Oops.
There it was. Fostering opportunities for economic growth and development that enhance the concepts of each of the promoting business vitality, success of a healthy, well-balanced community. For who?
This is a use that we don't have in our community, and our community is very tourism-oriented.
Oh, so geared towards tourists.
Yes, absolutely. Hence the 29 days.
How does it foster, so the economic growth is from the 29 days of the RVs and the patrons being there?
Hopefully using our beaches, using our downtown areas and spending their money here.
Okay. Thanks, Cindy.
You're welcome.
Again, how many are we trying to put here again?
It's a maximum of 50. I have shown 50.
Okay, and you're going to go out, and I remember you said you're going to go out and have to look at the land
Absolutely.
itself to determine if you can put, but no more than 50.
That's correct.
Okay, and I guess just to follow up on Councilman Waddell's question about like the 29 days. So just like what if, I'm thinking, if I was in lot 7 and it stayed for 29 days, and then I go to Walmart, and then on that 31st day I come to lot 10, you know, is that, would that make it a different stay, or, and you don't know? That's just hard
Again,
to
I
figure out.
defer to
Okay.
however the city will enforce it.
We'll get it built first.
That's correct.
There you
But
go.
part of the administrative administration is when guests come, they sign in, they probably have to sign out. And so there'll be a tracking system for sure.
I remember the last time you presented, you said that the community could use it? Did you say something like that? Like
I
use
probably did.
Use the house and
Oh.
whatever? I mean, the clubhouse or something did?
No. This is, all of the amenities would be specifically for the guests.
Okay. All right.
If you have an RV or a travel trailer, we'd welcome you.
Mr. Waddell, and then, please.
I guess back to the compliance, this may be for staff too, but back to the compliance issue, I do think that's important for the minimum length of stay. Probably not for this one, but maybe it's important to have on our radar. I believe the city had invested in some pretty significant software to track short-term rentals via the third-party listing platforms, Airbnb, VRBO, stuff like that. Are we aware if, I don't know what software, I'm sure there's a centralized, industry standard software for an RV park. Do we know if our regulating or compliance software would be able to scrape that data?
So we no longer have that software since the short-term rental regulations
Gotcha.
went away. So it was an expensive thing, and so we gave up that subscription when the short-term lodging went away. But I will tell you, in answer to your previous question, that as far as enforcement, my current belief, the way we would interpret that is if you did leave for any amount of time, at least one night overnight, you could come back. It doesn't matter if you came back to the same spot or to a different spot. As long as you leave for at least one night, then that clock would start over. However, what you couldn't do is just move around within the park, one spot to another without at least leaving for one night overnight.
And it's a big deal to hook up and unhook, and, I don't know.
Okay.
And
thank you.
Yes, sir, Mr. Anderson.
Well, I would just think, all these vehicles have license plates, so whether you sign in one person, the name, you can control it by the license tag and some kind of log, I would think. The other question I would have is and I don't know, this is probably outside of what even our jurisdiction, what we could dictate here, but what we're trying to avoid, obviously, is one of these campgrounds that becomes, permanent residences with all kinds of accessories. I don't know if that's something we can even put in the document, but we talk about people can. You've been by some of these things, and you got plastic outdoor pools. They got sheds and all kinds of other stuff, and I know that's not what you're after, but that's the fear.
Certainly.
So I don't know how to allay it.
Good evening. To answer your question directly, we will have covenants, pretty strict. We are obviously going grand scale with this to be as upscale as we can possibly make it. It's hard to even explain how this would compare to something else that's considered a resort, because with RV parks, you could call your backyard an RV resort if you had two friends that wanted to come stay on it. So there's no real designation. Even Good Sam it's the best that they have, and Good Sam also partners with those same RV parks to offer discounts on propane and goods. So it kind of seems to me like a little quid pro quo anyway to get yourself on that 10-10-10 list. But to answer your point, we're going to have pretty strict covenants. We're going to have gates at the front of the entrance. We designed it one way in, one way out. You could see the emergency exit is just for emergency vehicles, but to come and go, you have to go through those gates. And there will be 2 gates on one side for check-in, 1 gate coming and going if there's, a Class B vehicle like a Sprinter van that can kind of navigate to Carolina Beach or Wrightsville Beach with that vehicle, they can come back in. But when you leave, you have to leave through the exit. And we're going to have security cameras and, CCTV and the whole nine, because we want to keep everyone inside the park, safe. That's what they're paying for. We're going to be charging upwards of $140 a night. Going back to the point about 29 days, that's $4,300 a month. I don't know, if someone wants to leave for a day and come back, I don't think it's a terrible idea, but I don't think people are going to do that.
Thank you.
Just very quickly, one of the things that the Planning Commission added as a condition, and we agreed to, was there will be on-site management. Someone will be living there monitoring this 24 hours.
All right, any other, okay. Mr. Rembar?
I feel bad I don't have any comments. I just think it looks nice. It's a whole lot easier for me to visualize this time versus last time. So when you do your next one, start off with this.
I wish I had that talent. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This time I open up the public hearing and ask if anybody in the public wishes to speak on this particular item. Seeing none, are there any additional questions, comments from council? If not, I'm going to close the public hearing and ask for the wishes of council. We have a motion to approve by Councilmember Barnett, second by Mayor Pro Tem Haynes. Mr. Barnett, will you please read the consistency statement for the record, sir?
Mr. Mayor, if I may, just ask really quick, there was an additional, a change to condition 5 that the applicant proposed and that staff had agreed to, that would change the current condition 5 to read, any significant and specimen trees located on site, located outside of the building footprint and essential site improvements must be protected and retained. And I'm asking for, if that is part of your motion to
Yes, it
replace
is.
that. And also, I would make a quick note that the site plan does not currently show a kayak launch or the boardwalks that were referenced in the presentation. Those would have to be, those are not currently part of the site plan.
So that would be a part of this.
That would be, I guess, something that would have to be approved later through TRC or other means.
It either needs to be shown on the site plan or included as a condition to be enforceable.
Okay.
You're going to include it as a condition?
So
Yeah,
we may
I
need
included
to
in
ask specifically if
The kayak launch, Mr. Barnett is asking, is going to be specific.
There is a note on the site plan as such, and it is in the conditions, right?
It is not a condition at
Not
this
in the
point.
Oh, well, there is a note on the site plan that says kayak,
So then we'll put it into the condition of this motion.
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So we
Okay.
could add it, we'll add that as condition 8, that the kayak launch and boardwalks shown in the applicant's presentation, as shown in the applicant's presentation, would be
Okay.
included. Is that correct?
But we didn't show it in we showed examples of how it could look, and we commit to putting in a kayak launch, and however, to get out there, obviously, will require some type of a raised platform walkway. So as a condition that we provide access to Smith Creek, that is a condition we can certainly agree with.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
Including, with the kayak launch?
yes.
Okay.
Access for kayaks to get down to Smith Creek from the site.
We'll work on the wording of that and get it to the clerk.
That would certainly suit us.
But everybody knows what we're wanting. It's
I
good.
think so, yes.
Okay.
All right. I move to approve the proposed amendment to assign zoning to property located at 2231 One Tree Hill Way for light industrial to manufactured housing conditional district for a recreational vehicle campground, and finding to be consistent with the relevant policies in the comprehensive plan. Based on the application material and the information provided at the public hearing and in the staff report, and to find approval of the rezoning request is reasonable and in the public interest for the following reasons. The proposed rezoning would allow for additional recreation opportunities within the city.
Okay. All ready to vote? All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item passes 6-1. Is there a motion to waive second reading? Motion made by Councilmember Ravenbark, second by Councilmember Barnett. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item passes unanimously. That brings us to our next item of business, which are item PH3, which is an ordinance amending Chapter 18 of the Land Development Code for various amendments and cleanup items related to cross-access shading and parking lot landscaping requirements. At this time, I'd like to recognize our city manager, Ms. Tony Cottle.
Mr. Mayor, Linda Payne, our planning, Planning and Development Director, will oversee this item for us.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, and council members. The public hearing before you is for proposed amendments to the Land Development Code. This is a process that we undertake every quarter to correct items that we are finding difficulty with during implementation and to correct errors. The proposed amendments, there are 3, relate to cross-access requirements for commercial parking lots, shade coverage requirements for parking lots, and parking lot landscaping. In preparing these amendments, staff worked with 2 members of the Planning Commission to refine language that had originally been proposed in April. When proposing amendments, the priority is on the public interest while being receptive to concerns that are raised by residents and members of the development community. The First Amendment deals with commercial parking lot cross-access requirements. This is a new requirement that was added as part of the December 2021 rewrite of the Land Development Code. It is currently required between surface parking lots on adjacent non-residential properties. And as we have gone through implementation since the adoption of the code, we've recognized that this is a very broad requirement and that it's not necessarily needed or practical in all circumstances. So the staff is proposing to actually narrow the scope of this requirement, and the amendment would limit the applicability to corridors that are currently subject to our specific frontage requirements, with the exception of Wrightsville Avenue, because that has a distinct character and frontage requirements that already exist. We are proposing to establish minimum thresholds for implementation. You would either need to be, this would apply if you were doing a new principal building or if you were increasing the gross floor area on a site by 50% or more. Additionally, the original language did not have any exceptions, so there is no ability, if it was physically impossible, to waive this requirement. So the proposed language actually establishes several conditions under which myself as the planning director and the city engineer could modify or eliminate the requirement. And I will say that that will require concurrence from both of us in order to approve that waiver. We also are adding requirements that relate to easements associated with these interconnections, and we based a lot of this language on benchmarking where we looked at other communities and how they've handled this, where they've had these requirements for several years. The Second Amendment deals with our minimum shade coverage requirements. This is something where, as I believe you had the presentation and adoption of the Urban Forestry Master Plan recently, and in that plan, it noted that we have had a significant decrease in canopy coverage across the city between 2016 and today. In 2016, we had canopy coverage of 48.1%, and in 2021, that had decreased to 41.4%. That decrease in canopy coverage was attributed to Hurricane Florence development, as well as just the natural mortality of our large mature trees. As part of that plan, the top issue raised by the public was the loss of our tree canopy to development. As a result, the plan recommended revisions to the Land Development Code to incentivize preservation of trees as part of private development. In response to that, as well as response to concerns that have been identified by the development community, including confusion regarding the applicability of our current shade coverage standards and the need for more flexibility, staff is proposing a couple of clarification amendments. First of all, to clarify that our shade coverage only applies to impervious surfaces that are parking lots. It does not apply to buildings and any other impervious coverage on the site. Additionally, the development community had identified that there is an inequity in the way we currently regulate canopy coverage requirements. The table that you see on your screen provides a sliding scale. It differentiates between the location of the site within the 1945 corporate limits or outside of the 1945 corporate limits, and the larger the site, the more shade coverage that's required. The development community identified this as a concern because by their very nature, they are providing more shade coverage on larger sites as part of their developments. Based on, in working with them and looking at the requirements and the recommendations of the Urban Forestry Master Plan, staff is recommending changing this to a flat percentage of 15% shade coverage within the 1945 corporate limits and 30% outside the 1945 corporate limits. As you can see, those are the highest percentages that we require today based on lot size. So we would simply be applying those to all properties regardless of size if this amendment were approved. Additionally, in order to incentivize the preservation of existing trees, we are proposing to create a new table that identifies what credits you will receive based on the location of trees for parking lot landscaping. And as you can see, the two highlighted cells, 707 square feet for an interior island, 314 square feet for an understory tree. That is what we have today as flat shade coverage credits that we award. We do have language that says if you're along the perimeter, we will only award a partial credit for that based on what's actually being shaded. The proposed table provides clarity by identifying exactly how much shade coverage we will award based on the location of a tree in a parking lot. Additionally, as you can see, we have added columns for preserved protected canopy trees and preserved protected understory trees that give you additional credit if you're actually retaining trees in the existing trees in the parking lot instead of installing new trees.
Linda, real quick, in respect to the installation of trees, and you go through different parking lots, and let's just say, for example, the mall parking lot, the trees are up here with the wells not collecting any water. Do our tree arborists advise how to plant these trees, or because there seems to be an inconsistency in how they're being planted? Not, I guess everybody does it differently, but do our tree arborists ever advise on that in any way, shape, or form?
We do have technical standards. I will note when we get to the parking lot landscaping section that one of the things that we actually are proposing to remove are some detailed planting specifications, and that's really because it belongs more in the technical standards than it does in the land development code.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
And moving on to the third amendment, which deals with parking lot landscaping. And the main issue that we heard here from the development community was that additional flexibility was needed. They have been struggling to meet the parking demand for parking spaces while also meeting the parking lot landscaping requirements. That was due in part to two of our current requirements. One, we require that landscape islands can be no further apart than 12 spaces, and there is no flexibility on that. So at least every 12 spaces, you have to have a landscape island. And second, we do have a minimum soil volume requirement of 1,000 cubic feet, and that is to promote healthy trees that can actually thrive. We're planting trees in a very difficult environment with a lot of asphalt around them, so that 1,000 cubic feet of soil was intended to provide adequate space for the root systems to grow. One thing that we recognized as we worked through this issue with the development community was that 1,000 cubic feet was regardless of the type of tree you were planting. So if you were that really is designed for a canopy tree, so it is a little bit much when you're doing an understory tree. So one of the proposed changes is actually to reduce the soil volume requirements for understory trees. To provide additional flexibility, we are also proposing to eliminate the requirement that an island be located every 12 spaces, and instead replace that with a requirement that says you have to have at least one tree for every 12 spaces. 75% of those trees must be canopy trees, and all parking spaces must be located within 70 feet of a canopy tree. So we're trying to provide designers with a little flexibility on how they meet the shade coverage requirements and balance that with the need to accommodate the parking. We are also clarifying that the soil volume requirements require root accessible and not compacted soils to make sure that as these islands are being installed, we have soils that are supporting the trees. And we're crediting soils that are located under pervious pavement that adjoin the island or medium towards that volume requirement. And that is because we already know that those are going to be uncompacted soils in order to handle stormwater. And lastly, we are specifying a minimum island size of 144 square feet. So again, this will allow you to do a smaller island as long as you have that pervious pavement and provide that soil volume for the trees. We do have a few other minor requirements, as I mentioned, the technical standards that we're proposing to remove because they do belong in the technical standards manual, and we are removing a term that is actually not used and not defined anywhere in terms of peninsula. So that is the presentation, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Yes, sir, Ms. Rumbar.
I work in a new office complex off Autumn Hall, and everything's beautiful landscape, but where the parking spaces, like between the two islands, there's 4 parking spaces that abut those things, and people get out of their car and walk on it. I mean, it's just, because sometimes you park so close to the curb, when you open your car door, that's where you step, and it ruins the landscaping in that island. It just does. And it's not just where I work. I notice it everywhere I go. So I don't know what you could do to prevent that, but people go to great expense, irrigation, to put this kind of low ground cover or some knockout roses, and they get stomped to death. And there's nothing I hate worse. We put those conditions in permits, just like we did tonight, putting something in, and it's something that is just about we don't enforce. I can ride past places that we did 2, 3, 4 years ago. The shrubs are dead or they're not maintained, and we don't do a thing about it. I mean, we should. I know it takes more manpower, but that's the thing that gives eye appeal and curb appeal and makes everything look nice. And if they don't take care of it or they don't have irrigation and it dies, they don't do anything about it. That's something I would like to see built into our landscape ordinance.
We do require irrigation, so that, and I can't tell you if that's a new requirement. I can look into that for you, but I know we do require irrigation today.
Well, we used to didn't, and we would take bonds. If somebody was planting in July, we'd take a bond and let them plant in October or November. But, anyway, I'm beating a dead horse here. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Linda. Okay. All right, I'm going to open up the public hearing and ask if anybody in the public wishes to speak on item PH3. Seeing none, are there any additional questions from council? Okay. I will now close the public hearing and ask for the wishes of council. We have a motion to approve by Councilmember Spears, second by Councilmember Waddell. Ms. Spears, will you please read a consistency statement for the record, please, sir?
I move to approve the amendments to the Land Development Code and find it to be consistent with the relevant policies in the comprehensive plan based on the application materials and the information provided at the public hearing and in the staff report, and to find approval of the request is reasonable and in the public interest for the following reasons. The proposed changes will correct issues uncovered during implementation of the new Land Development Code.
All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? We have a unanimous vote. Do we have a motion to waive second reading? Motion made by Councilman Rivenbark, second by Councilman Waddell. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously on first as well as second reading. Okay, that brings us to our next item of business, which is our ordinances. Item 01 is an ordinance making supplemental appropriation to the Special Purpose Fund from the North Carolina Governor's Highway Safety Program grant in the amount of $26,200 for WPD overtime, or better known as the Wilmington Police Department, for the purpose of traffic safety. At this time, I'd like to recognize our city manager, Mr. Tony Cottle. Mr. Cottle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Captain Tom Tillman with the Wilmington Police Department will overview this item for us.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council. We received $26,000 from the Governor's Highway Safety Program. This ordinance is just going to move that money over into our special purpose fund for overtime for traffic enforcement. So basically, I oversee our traffic enforcement unit, and this is going to give us supplemental, like we can put it out and have patrol officers come in on their day off that are radar certified and have them do additional traffic enforcement, particularly in areas where, we send our traffic engineers to, and we don't necessarily, like, for instance, we had a traffic fatality yesterday. We had a pedestrian fatality, if y'all are aware. The traffic unit tries to enforce those areas where we have fatalities in an effort to reduce the speeds on those roadways, to reduce the chances of having a fatality. But sometimes that means that we're taken away from the neighborhoods where I know y'all get complaints about speeding in residential neighborhoods. Well, these enforcement efforts and the overtime efforts could allow us to employ those efforts into those neighborhoods where they complain, as well as doing our normal enforcement. That's what we're looking for to accomplish with this.
Okay. Any additional questions, comments? Okay. Thank you, sir. For the wishes of the council, we have a motion to approve by Mayor Pro Tem Haynes, second by Councilmember Spears. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously on first reading. Is there a motion to waive second reading? Motion made by Councilmember Barnett, second by Councilmember Spears. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously on first as well as second reading. That brings us to our next item of business, which is our resolution. Item R1 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a 5-year agreement with Axon Enterprises Incorporated of Scottsdale, Arizona, for equipment and services for the Wilmington Police Department. WPD's budget impact of $3,857,811.94. And at this time, I'd like to recognize our city manager, Mr. Tony Cottle. Mr. Cottle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Deputy Chief Ben Kennedy with the Wilmington Police Department will overview this item for us.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council members, Madam Clerk, City Manager, and staff. Attached for your consideration is a resolution to authorize the city manager to... Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I'm sorry about that. Attached for your consideration is a resolution to authorize the city manager to enter into a 5-year agreement with Axon Enterprise Incorporated for a bundle package combining costs of all Axon equipment used by the Wilmington Police Department. This bundle includes a great deal of recording equipment that monitors officer safety and behavior for the Wilmington Police Department. Included in the bundle package will be an upgraded taser and taser cartridge system, live stream monitor system, auto tag licensing, interview room software, body and in-car camera systems, and unlimited digital evidence storage. Warranties for these items are included in the bundle as well. The total estimated amount of the contract is $3,857,811.94 and will be broken down over the course of the 5 years as follows. Fiscal year 24, $725,812.78. Fiscal year 25 would be $742,935.39. Fiscal year 26, $762,166.59. And then for fiscal year 27, $788,788.57. Fiscal year 28, $838,108.61. Now, by entering into this bundle package, this agreement versus agreement for each individual item, the city saves over the 5 years $700,491.50 during this contract period. Of course, all future costs will be contingent upon approval of the annual operating budget.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Kennedy? Okay. Mr. Spears.
Ben, that
Yes, sir.
tag reader, how did you describe it in?
Okay, with this auto tag, and what happens, I also may go to a call, or several officers go to a call, and the case number is generated for that call. Now, at the end of the call, and sometime during the course of these officers' shift, CAD and the system with Axon will interface. And when they interface, any video recorded during that time will automatically pick up that case number, putting everything together. So it takes the responsibility off the officers to have to go back and tag these recordings. And by doing that, we meet standards.
So it's not the tag reader?
No, sir. It's not tag reading, but they call it auto tag. That's
You
what they
good,
call
you
it.
good with me. I was about to have to call Donnie after this. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Waddell?
Just curious, is this all equipment and software that we are currently utilizing, that we're upgrading and then bundling for the cost savings, or is there any new, other than upgrading, is there any new programs or materials that we're bringing in?
Everything is what we already are using, sir, and what we're doing is bringing a couple of contracts together to streamline it and make everything nice and easy, because if we keep them separate, we're actually going to spend more money that way. So we finally got to a point where we could do it. Of course, the tasers are upgraded, going to the newest models, because the models that we currently carry, they no longer support. So we needed to go to something new.
Understood. Thank you.
Mr. Barnett?
A quick question. With the
Yes, sir.
tasers, a newer model, does that mean, because I've seen when people get tased and they still keep going forward.
Yes, sir.
Does the newer models mean if I tase you, you drop, or?
Well, with this newer model, they call it the Taser 10. It gives extended distance. You can be about 45 feet away and still make contact. So that gives us a better chance to de-escalate the situation before we ever have to deploy. But also, Taser 10 has 10 probes. So if you deploy and it doesn't work, instead of also having to take the cartridge off and reload, the probes already there, so we could try another time. So it gives us a better chance to de-escalate the situation by talking, but if we have to engage, it gives us a better chance to get this subject under control without having to get too close to him.
Okay. Thank you.
What are the wishes of council in respect to the motion? We have a motion approved by Councilmember Barnett, second by Councilmember Rivenbark. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item passes unanimously. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
That brings us to our next item, which is item R2, which is resolution authorizing contract amendment number 6 for the 2021 annual needs stormwater infrastructure drainage repairs and rehabilitation project in the amount of $3,080,000 with New Pipe LLC of Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. Stormwater capital budget impact is $3,080,000. Mr. Royal.
Good evening. This is amendment number 6 for New Pipe. The work is a little over $3 million, so it takes the whole contract up to about $8.7 million, so it's pretty substantial. This is their last year of a 3-year contract, so we're looking forward to them doing this work for us and moving forward. So,
Fred, I know you were explaining this yesterday when you were talking to us about how you're maintaining these pipes instead of having to pull them up and put new pipes in the ground, which saves us a tremendous amount of money. This is a new process, or a process that y'all have been using now for a little bit of time.
3 to 4 years.
3 to 4 years.
Since Florence, really.
And it's paying dividends. It's working. It's doing well.
That's
The
correct.
ones you've been monitoring after you've replaced them, or you've put the landing
That's
into
correct.
the pipe. So this will help accelerate that.
We've actually had discussion about this morning. The Hurricane Florence, we did what's called point repair, which is where you do dig up the road.
Right.
And we went away from that, and we're doing this method now. And this method works very well for us.
So Fred, just real quick, when you're looking to replace or do these linings, are you cameraing the system, and that's where you're finding the deficiencies in the pipe?
Absolutely. We have 2 CCTV camera systems and crew that does that very thing for us for us to analyze and decide what method we need to use to repair the pipe and what priority to put the system in. So these projects came as a result of that.
Will this accelerate a lot of that? this will help accelerate a lot of.
That's
those
right.
repairs.
And we're also working to try to catch up, as you will, with the street resurfacing program, which is, quite a substantial bit more of funds. So we're trying to catch up and get ahead of street resurfacing.
Okay, very good.
It's going to take some time.
I understand. Anybody else? Okay.
I was going to say, I have a little document here if you want to get a copy for, it describes the methods and what we've done through Contract Amendment 5 versus what we're getting ready to do with 6.
If you'll give it to the
If you-
clerk, she'll give
okay.
it to us. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you. What are the wishes of council in respect to the resolution? We have a motion to approve by Councilmember Barnett, second by Councilmember Waddell. Discussion, all in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously. I've got all your votes. Dylan, all of our monitors up here are not operating properly, so we're going to be taking a lot of voice votes here. Okay? All right, that brings us to our next item, which is item 3, which is a resolution authorizing filing of condemnation action for acquisition of right-of-way and easements for the Hooker Road, Hinton Avenue, and Riceville Green multi-use path project. At this time, I'd like to recognize the city manager, Mr. Caudle. Mr. Caudle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Deputy City Attorney Sean Evans will overview this item for us.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members. Most of you were briefed on this a couple of weeks ago, and this is essentially the same presentation. As City Attorney Everhart indicated at the beginning of the meeting after Mr. Ward spoke, this is really a timing issue due to federal funding constraints. We need to acquire the necessary easements and a very, very small amount of right-of-way that are needed to complete this project. And the filing deadline for that's at the end of the month, which is why we're asking to move forward with this. In an ideal world, we'd have a couple more months to work with cooperating property owners like Mr. Ward and a few others to try to get more of these resolved. And we're certainly committed to continuing those efforts to resolve those claims. And but in order to move this project forward, we're asking for your vote tonight to authorize condemnation if we're unable to reach resolutions in these matters. I've got a short presentation. It's basically the same as what you've seen before. I'm happy to go through that if you'd like.
Sean, just, Mr. Ward spoke to us earlier, and I know that he's sent some commentary to us over the last couple of months.
Yes, sir.
In respect to some of the issues he's had with his particular property. I know there's been others. And to Ms. Everhart's comments, this does not stop the ongoing negotiations with Mr. Ward and other members of the public that we're having to do this.
No, sir, absolutely not. Those efforts will continue.
Okay. One other thing, just, and this is just, when we go out here and we're identifying where these trails are going to go, and then we move them to the other side of the road or other side we're going to go with them, it does create a lot of consternation. I would just hope that we spend a heck of a lot more time in evaluating which way we're going to go before we go there. And I know I've had this conversation with Mr. Cottle and others in respect to that, because if you put it on one side of the road and you switch it to the other side, then people get upset because you moved it to the other side. And I know a lot of that has to do sometimes with stormwater, utility issues, Department of Transportation issues, and a lot of other things. I just didn't realize how much really goes into building a trail system. You think it'd be a heck of a lot easier than building a road, but it seems like it's about the same. But I think we just need to do a little bit better job in evaluating where we put these things, so we give the community and the public a definitive answer once we get out there, instead of having to go back and forth sometimes across the road. Yes, sir, Mr. Anderson.
John, I wonder if you could just elaborate a little bit more on the issue with, I guess, it's Duke Power. Or how does that get resolved? That they're another player in this. It seemed to come up in the gentleman that spoke to us earlier. Are we past that now, and that's taken a long time, or is that still in play?
So specifically with Mr. Ward, there's a meeting that was scheduled this week that unfortunately got canceled and got moved to next week. Duke's a necessary player in that conversation, and the plan is for that to proceed next week with the project manager and Duke out there on site. The project's fully designed. The takings that we'll be taking forward, the condemnations we'll be taking forward are based on what's designed. We certainly have the flexibility in situations to make modifications if we need to, and can address that in future negotiations.
So asked a little differently, does Duke jeopardize your deadline?
No, sir.
You follow what I'm asking?
Let me try to answer it, and if I'm not answering your question correctly, I'll just rephrase and I'll try to do better. But no, sir, we have flexibility beyond that deadline. Once the condemnations are filed, the city has the title necessary to move forward with the project. That doesn't mean that we can't make small adjustments if need be later on.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Okay. What are the wishes of council in respect to the resolution? We have a motion to approve by Councilmember Barnett, second by Councilmember Waddell. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously. That brings us to our next item of business, which is item R4, which is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter amendment number 3 with Parker, Poe, Adams, and Bernstein LLP, and ratifying amendments number 1 and number 2 in the total amount of $117,714 for services during the acquisition of 929 North Front Street. This time, I'd like to recognize the city manager, Mr. Caudill. Mr. Caudill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. City Attorney Meredith Everhart will overview this item.
Yes, sir. Parker, Poe, Adams, and Bernstein was retained in order to handle and assist the city with the acquisition of the Thermo Fisher properties, including 929 North Front Street. They did a various number of things for us during that process, including drafting of contracts, memorandums of agreement, purchase and sale agreements. They actually facilitated the closing and went back and forth with the broker, with the seller, and with various parties in order to help us get that all done in the time frames that we had through due diligence. And they did a very good job, a yeoman's job with all of that. And this is, we had a first initial contract with them for $75,000. They did bill up to that amount, and so these, they could not bill further without additional approval from council, and so these are for the approvals of the billing since that time.
Any questions on R4? Okay. What are the wishes of council in respect to the resolution? We have a motion to approve by Councilmember Spears, second by Councilmember Waddell. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously. That brings us to our next item, which is item R5, which is a resolution authorizing the city manager to negotiate and execute a contract with LS3P Associates Limited for professional architectural services involving 929 North Front Street. At this time, I'd like to recognize City Manager, Mr. Caudill. Mr. Caudill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Deputy City Manager Chad McEwen will overview this item for us.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem Haynes, members of City Council. What you have before you tonight is consideration of a resolution authorizing a contract with LS3P and Associates for professional services related to the upfit, architectural designs for 929 North Front Street, commonly known as the former Thermo Fisher building. This is essentially the RFQ timeline that the city followed. One thing to point out here is that we did, for expediency purposes, we did start this process prior to closing. We advertised this RFQ and made it public on June 15th, and then essentially a month later closed on the property. We started the process to position the city as best possible to be ready to design the upfits and consider the upfits for the building as soon after closing as possible. That's what brought us here tonight. In terms of the process, we had a very competitive RFQ environment for the project. We had a total of 9 submittals. We had a 3-person committee that considered the submittals, including myself, Economic Development Director, Mr. Parsley, as well as Deputy City Manager, Mary Vigue. Based on those 9 proposals, we did an initial scoring qualification determination whittle it down to 3 interviewed firms. All 3 firms were brought in to be interviewed face-to-face. All 3 firms had very specific experience with the building or either prior experience with the city in terms of space needs assessments done for 315. Honestly, we would have felt comfortable, the panel would have felt comfortable with any of those 3 being the selected firm, but LS3P, based on prior experience and doing the initial phase of the space needs assessment for Thermo Fisher when we entered into the contract, gave LS3P the advantage. Scoring criteria is listed here, broken down pretty much common breakdown related to professional services for this similar type of work. As I said, LS3P was the highest, most qualified firm, strongest track record for similar projects. Again, LS3P did the space needs assessment for the building related to which departments were going to go into the building, which floors they best were suited to occupy. And again, a diverse skill set across team members to support various aspects of the scope. The most diverse, complete proposal was from LS3P in terms of the aspects that were represented in their proposal: architectural, interior design, everything listed up there. I won't read it to you. There's essentially 5 phases of the proposal that LS3P has put forward. Phase 1 services, we talked about a little bit yesterday morning, were the schematic designs of the building, where LS3P is going to meet with management as well as the individual departments to discuss the spaces those departments will occupy. That portion of the project is a fixed cost at $58,100. It's important to point out that phases 2 through 5 are estimated to be around $187,000, but that number is contingent upon the designs that come out of phase 1. And based on an estimated budget of $1.5 million. So the cost of phases 2 through 5 could vary up or down depending on the results of phase 1, if that makes sense. We anticipate that the total amount of the contract, again, based on a $1.5 million upfit cost for the professional services, is going to be $253,100. One important thing to point out, that all of the design information is contingent upon which floors the city is going to occupy. As we discussed yesterday, the proposal is based on, and the direction that Mr. Boney's been provided to date, was based on the city occupying floors 1, 3, 10, 11, and 12. Initially, what Mr. Boney's going to look at, and we're joined tonight by Mr. Boney if you have any specific questions for him, or if that is the case, the floors that we occupy, which floors out of that list can we occupy the soonest, meaning which are the most turnkey ready for the city to move in. More than likely, those are definitely going to be 11 and 12 and potentially portions of the 10th floor. The other floors will require varying degrees of upfit for the city to occupy, including 1, 3, or any of the other floors if the decision's made to change the floors the city is going to occupy. One important component to remember is how we got to this point in terms of which scheme of floor allocation the city chooses. Initially, Scheme A was proposed. Scheme A was the proposal that we would occupy floors 7 through 12. Then after consideration, we thought internally, and there was some feedback from council, that we needed to occupy lower floors, which meant Scheme B came into the equation. Those were floors 1 through 4. Scheme C is kind of what we refer to also as the hybrid of the 2 initial plans. And again, Scheme C is floors 1, 3, 10, 11, and 12. You'll see here, this is part of the initial deliverable provided by Mr. Boney in the space needs assessment done for Thermo Fisher. 3 criteria that were the priorities in determining which floors we occupied were listed there on the left side of that chart. First, minimizing the upfit costs for the space the city would occupy. Scheme C scored the highest in that regard based upon the turnkey nature of floors 10, 11, and 12. Maximizing the public access. Again, this was present in Scheme A as well as Scheme C in the sense that both those schemes involved the first floor. The final criteria that was considered was maximizing interdepartment collaboration. If you look on the right side, those are all the departments that are represented that will be relocated into the Thermo Fisher building. Once we had that list, we started looking at synergy related to those departments. And once that synergy was reached or realized with those complementary departments, what space thereby in the Thermo floors did they best fit in physically? Scheme C best fit that in regards to the analysis done by LS3P. I believe that's it. And with that, I'll take any questions, and as I said, Mr. Boney's here if you have specific questions of the consultant.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson?
Chad, help me with, I mean, as I was just taking notes because I had your piece of paper, this slide, but I didn't know what it was for until just now. So floors 1 through 4 is Scheme B, correct?
I'm sorry?
Floors 1 through 4 is Scheme B, correct? I mean, that's what, I just took notes. I'm just confirming. I think I'm right.
I'm sorry, I think I misspoke. Scheme A, Scheme B is 7 through 12. Maybe 1 through 4 was Scheme A.
Okay. And so enlighten me on the, what's the difference in the upfit cost between the three plans, approximately?
That's tough to say. What we asked Mr. Boney to do, and we couldn't get into the granular level of that cost under our prior contract, but we did get Mr. Boney to look at it from a 30,000-foot standpoint in terms of which floors are most turnkey, and that was the result of Scheme C and that grid there, the matrix that's shown. In Mr. Boney, and I don't want to speak for Mr. Boney, he's welcome to come up here and elaborate, but based on my understanding of the analysis they did, those floors under Scheme C were best suited to reflect a lower upfit cost than if we had to recreate those offices, comparable offices, on, let's say, floors 7, 8, or 9.
Let's hear from Mr. Boney, because I'd just like to understand if we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars or 5,000, you know, how big is this? Because the upfit costs are a one-time thing. We'll be there a long time. I mean, sure, that matters, of course, but I'm just curious as to what the delta is to some degree.
Well, we were looking at these costs as somewhat small, medium, and large. We were looking at the most complicated movement would be to redo all floor level 4 in order to create executive spaces, whereas on levels 11 and 12, we were looking at those as things that we could move into turnkey, just about turnkey, with very few changes in there. We were looking at the number of offices that we had available immediately on the upper levels, and that was a very simple thing to take our the management suite and move them into that. As far as an exact number, I don't have that exact number because we did not. Yeah.
We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions or?
I think you're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars. I don't think you're looking at millions of dollars. I think you're looking at, in order to move into or create similar space on level 4 for the administrative function of the city council or city chambers, we'd be looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars, not millions of dollars, certainly.
So in other words, in just visualizing this, larger offices is what you're saying, creating more executive offices.
Creating more executive offices on the level 4.
Right.
Yes,
So
correct.
that's the major transition.
That's right. But level 4, as you recall, is a series of open spaces and a bunch of smaller spaces. We would essentially take those, I would believe, take the open spaces that are currently cubicles, turn those, create more executive level spaces into those things. That involves sheetrock, HVAC systems, changing over power, data, and things like that.
Okay. Thank you.
And I'm sorry, I don't have an exact.
No, I
number
didn't
for
expect you to. I was just trying to get a feel for how big a difference there were.
Understood. Yes, sir.
Mr. Waddell?
And I don't have a question for Mr. Boney at this time, but you guys know, I think everyone up here knows that this is a decision that I've been very passionate about since we first talked about purchasing the building and how we would choose to occupy it. And none of the comments and the arguments I'm going to make are meant to denigrate the work that has been done by LS3P. I have nothing but respect for your firm and the work that you guys do in the community, and have no doubt that you are certainly the most qualified to continue performing the space analysis. I think you were tasked with operating under very specific criteria from our staff, and it's my opinion that the criteria itself was perhaps not objective and was made to produce a specific outcome, and that's the recommendation that we have with Scheme C. I sent an email on April 10th, long before we finalized the acquisition of the building, to council. It was a private email, but I think this is kind of my last-ditch effort to have us occupy 1 through 4, floors 1 through 4. I do truly believe it's the best way forward. So I know it's been a long meeting, but I'm just going to read it really quickly. I felt compelled to send a follow-up email to implore the council to reconsider what floors we, the city, would choose to occupy. It is my position that moving forward with the proposal as presented is not in the city's best interest and will result in adverse effects on the city's financial position for years to come. First, I want to say that I believe the acquisition and subsequent sale of surplus property to be a good deal, one that we can certainly make work. However, it is imperative that we, both the council and the C-suite staff, remove our egos from the equation and consider that the city does not need to occupy the top floors to include the penthouse floors for this acquisition to work. On the contrary, I would argue that the more advantageous position is for the city to occupy floors 1 through 4. Again, this can be a good deal for the future of Wilmington, but only if leadership ensures from the outset that this acquisition will operate in the most efficient manner for our organization and on behalf of the taxpayer. That means recognizing quite simply that by occupying floors 1 through 4, we accomplish the following. 1, solve our space needs. The space needs study that was conducted at the direction of the governance committee concluded that consolidating all 15 departments into one building would require 101,800 square feet of space. That's what predicated this whole thing, was us looking at building the other building prior to us having Thermo Fisher become available for acquisition. Floors 1 through 4 exceed this study recommendation by 30%. They offer 131,671 square feet of rentable space. Number 2, it increases our organizational efficiency. Goal number 7 of the space needs study aims to encourage synergies between departments and create a consistent culture across the entire city government. By spreading ourselves partially between floors 1 and 3 and with the rest of the city on the upper levels, including the penthouse, it is in direct opposition to the findings of our initial space needs study. And increase our accessibility to the public. Goal number 5 of the space needs study says, like it or not, citizens on their own when visiting the buildings. The facilities are self-service to some extent and need to offer clear direction to visitors. Occupying floors 1 through 4 would provide far more ease of use to the public whom we serve and increase the public-facing aspects of the city. Would save roughly $1,400,000 on the annual operating expenses via additional rental income. This should not be overlooked. I included in that email a rudimentary spreadsheet that showed potential rental income from both approaches, and I pulled all of that information directly from the appraisal that we all had at our disposal. Mainly, what I want to call y'all's attention to, not reading from this email anymore, is the potential rental income as pulled from the appraisal of $1,400,000 potentially annually. If we're looking at minimizing our upfit costs, which is, again, to Councilman Anderson's point, a one-time cost for what we're going to occupy in perpetuity and potentially leave on the table millions and millions of dollars every year in potential rental income is, it's a non-starter for me. I believe this is, it's government at its worst if we occupy these top floors. And I can't say that any more strongly, I don't think.
Mr. Anderson?
Well, Mr. Payne, you might, unless somebody else has a question for you, you might just want to sit down because this is not directed at you in any way. In fact, I welcome y'all's services and look forward to having y'all do whatever we end up doing at the PP Thermo Fisher building. But we're dinging up here. But anyway, tonight, obviously, this is not. It seems like we maybe could have discussed this at a different time versus now, but here we are. So we're discussing what floors we occupy, and 1 and 3 seem obvious to me. 3 is where the safe is. That's where the clerk goes. 1 is, as designed, as suggested. Those are all our citizen-facing services, be it pay bills, be it, can't even remember all the ones that are on there, but the clinic, council chambers. So those two to me are, those boxes are checked. So then it's do you get it, on floors 2 and 4, or do you go above a prospective tenant, the existing tenant? I guess we've kind of ventured in. A lot of people are asking me now why, they ask why Thermo Fisher? Why do we buy that? Why do we do that? And Luke got into it. We had plans. And I was kind of shocked when it first came up, but the more you looked at it, it was a great deal for the taxpayer. It's a great deal for the city. But we've also now find ourselves in an odd position. Now we are farming this out to professionals, but we're also landlords. And so we need to be considering how do we, and we have a big operating expense there, mostly knowns, probably some unknowns we'll find out about as we go, but it's a big number. And to cover that operating expense over the long term, those upper floors are worth more to lease. So in my mind, the city, the public, the government should be on the lower floors at the lower cost, and we should have those to lease and to cover the operating expense. I mean, a dream of mine would be to have us on those first 4 floors, and ultimately one day have another corporate headquarters of some kind we could attract here with those upper floors. As is, if the building's all chopped up, I don't see that as very attractive to someone like that. Sure, we can lease a floor to somebody, part of a floor to somebody, 4 people. I'd love to have that ability. And if we, so I can't support that. I'm on board with I'm not on board with, I just feel the same way that I guess not identical feelings, but I want to be on floors 1 through 4 or the lower floors, I'll put it that way. So that, I just wanted to express my views on it, and with that, thank you.
Well, we're on different banks of the river on this one, Neil and Luke, because we're the long-term people there. We're the ones who are going to be there for 75 or 100 years. And that's where we need to be. That's our building. We've got a very attractive building that's sitting on the 50-yard line, trophy location, all the accolades you can lay to it. And that's where this city needs to be. And I'm not going to apologize to anybody for going first class. We deserve it. We've struck a deal for the taxpayers of this community that is beyond belief. Forget about just the building, guys. Think about the parking deck, the 2 pieces of property that come along with this. Guys, this is a no-brainer. Floor 1 is common area. That doesn't even, that's not office space. We got a giant room there where we can hold these things the convention center wants to use, we're not going to have any issues if you quit reading the damn New York Times and listening to all these people in these other markets that are depressed, and get off of that and think about where we are. And don't look at gloom and doom. We're paying millions to run this place every year. We're going into a new building. There's going to be upfront expense, and I'm not going to apologize for my stance. I'm all for this, taking the floors that our professional says that we should take.
Ms. Haynes?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will say in response to Neil, yes, we would get more money for the top floors, but because of that and finding the perfect tenant, it would be much more, it would be more expensive. We would get more money, but it would also be more difficult to find a tenant. So in renting property, and I'm not a commercial realtor like Charlie and some others, but there is absorption, and I think we'll have a much easier time renting the lower floors for a lower price. So that's my concern there. I do think that this, quite frankly, shouldn't even be before us, and I've said this before, but each and every one of us took an oath of office and put our hands on the Bible and swore that we would support the strong manager, weak mayor, weak council form of government. And that would mean that if you keep your oath, that you would be deferring to the city manager and the executive staff to work with the professionals like Charles Boney and his firm. And it either works or it doesn't, and over time, if it doesn't work, then the responsibility for that falls back on the city manager. So I don't believe that we should even be involved in debating this, quite frankly, when it comes to public administration and how municipalities are supposed to operate, and the fact of what our promise and good faith of public service means. So for me, I agree that we ought to be on the top, on the higher floors. We have more floors now because of Mr. Boney and LS3P doing an analysis. We have another floor that we can rent that we were not going to be able to do, I guess, before. And so, you know, I just defer to LS3P and to Charles Boney and the experiences we've had over the last 20 plus years and their professionalism.
Well, I'm just going to make a comment. I've listened to this council debate about what floors we take. And first and foremost, I want to tell the community this was a unanimous vote to purchase this property. We evaluated it. There was a lot of consternation whether we should or we shouldn't. Our city staff and Tony did a tremendous job in getting us to a point where we could purchase this without a tax increase. As Charlie alluded to, the pieces of property to the north and to the south make a lot of sense in really divesting ourselves of those properties or portions of some of those properties. And the other properties that we currently reside in to even get the debt even lower than what we purchased it for. We saved the taxpayers based on the decision to purchase this about $55 million based on the analysis of building a brand new municipal building here at 305. Now, whether the executive suites were on the first floor, the second floor, the fourth floor, the sixth floor, and I've gone into those floors several times to evaluate it on my own, I would be wherever we could move into immediately. And I've walked into every one of those floors. Going to Mr. Boney's point, whatever this is going to cost us, and it will be probably hundreds of thousands of dollars for those that have been in the commercial real estate market, and especially if you're upfitting commercial space, it's going to cost you money. I don't think we need to be spending any additional funds for space that is already ready to go with office furnishings already there, with doors, everything is there. We just walk in the door. I didn't purchase this property for a real estate investment. I purchased it, I believe, for the municipal government building. This is where we're going to put our municipal government. Yes, we have some additional space in there that we will be leasing. And I would have ventured to say that over time, we will grow into that building even more than what we currently are in currently. So I'm looking at it currently as the most cost-efficient way to do this, in my view, based on what Mr. Boney shared with me and my own views walking into that building, is to occupy the 2 top floors since they are ready to go. We don't have to do literally anything except move ourselves into it. The desks are even there. Why would we want to go spend additional funds to upfit an additional floor and then have to try to recoup those costs from a potential tenant that may or may not give us the money that we want on the top floor? I've been told that $30 a foot, for which is what we got from Thermo Fisher, is top dollar in this market. Some people argue, well, you can get 40 or 50. Maybe, maybe not. But what I'm looking at right now is what's the best deal for the taxpayer of this city in regards to expenditure of funds for upfitting that building. And currently the way I look at it and see it is that we should go into the top 2 floors because they are ready to go. Whether it be, like I said, if it was on the first floor, Neil, or Luke, I would be on the first floor. I just want to go where we can get into it the quickest, and that to me that's the place to be. But here again, it was a unanimous decision. We saved the taxpayers $55 million, and I don't want to spend any additional money having to upfit floors because of a perception that we should be on lower floors, or we can get more money for the top floors because no one has been able to tell me definitively you can get more than $30 a foot. So that's my position on it. Anybody else? Mr. Barnett?
Yeah, my position is to go with the recommendation from Mr. Boney, and it's not an ego thing. It's not an ego trip. It's just, I think that, I agree with you, it's key ready. I've been in the building. I was there last Friday, and you're right, we got a great deal, even with the furnishings. They even left the painting on the wall. You know, I'm like, wow. So I'm in favor of accepting the recommendation from Mr. Boney.
Ms. Spears.
No, I just want to provide the information to the taxpayers that it was my idea not to raise taxes to make this purchase. I want to make sure we put that out there. Thank you.
One more comment. Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, sir.
There was significant conversation during this whole process about us mitigating the operational expense, the ongoing operational expense of this building, which is a significant OpEx, and roughly $3 million plus a year. And there was a lot of good faith conversations that we would do everything we could to mitigate that ongoing OpEx. Floors 1 through 4 does exactly that. Laid out the numbers. The only conversation that I'm seeing on why we're doing this is that it's minimizing the upfit cost. One-time upfit cost of maybe a few $100,000 and leaving on the table over $1 million a year in potential rental income. And if a potential tenant is going to look at floors, you know, some of the middle floors that we're giving them, they're also going to say, hey, this costs more to upfit. And then we may have just empty floors, because we didn't give the penthouse top most marketable floors the opportunity to be put on the open market to be rented to recoup that funds back to the taxpayer. This is it's black and white, and there's time to do the right thing, and this is the right thing. The taxpayer got behind us on this. We didn't get much pushback on this building because we laid it out and it's a good plan. I think it's imperative that we operate it the right way, do the right thing right from the get-go, and I'll continue to hold that position. I won't be swayed from it.
Mr. Anderson.
Just have a question, because it's find it odd. There's nothing on this resolution about floors. You know, it's just about hiring LS3P. So, you know, it seems like we're talking about something that's not even, I mean, it's germane, but it's not part of the resolution. So I just would love the advice of council or whoever as to what are we voting on? I mean,
you're voting.
Because I would vote for floors 1 through 4, but that's not what's on this resolution.
You're voting to award toward a contract for design services and construction management services associated with the renovation of 929 North Front Street. The reason we're asking for a definitive answer on this today is so that we can go ahead and make those plans. Once we hire this firm, they will have to know which floors need to be occupied and which ones will then, of course, potentially need to be retrofitted or not retrofitted to meet the needs of the city.
Okay.
Okay. Well, we have a motion on the floor by Councilmember Spears, second by Councilmember Reinberg. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. Passes unanimously. That brings us to our next and last item of business, which is reports. Item RP1, Council's appointments committees for boards and commissions. And this time I'd like to recognize Councilmember Charlie Reinberg. Mr. Reinberg.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Appointments Committee, which is made up of myself, Councilmember Luke Waddell, Councilmember Neil Anderson, met July 31st in the downstairs conference room, and we offer for your consideration the following recommendations. For the Convention Center Advisory Committee, by the way, Mrs. Penny Spicer Sidbury, our city clerk, we couldn't run this committee without her. And Melissa Huffman, Assistant City Attorney, is there to keep us out of trouble most of the time. The first recommendation is to the Convention Center Advisory Committee, reappoint Michael Epting. There are specific professions and job descriptions that these folks have. His area is area attraction, with a term to expire August the 4th, 2026. For the Fireman's Relief Fund Board of Trustees, appoint Robert Cooley to fill a vacancy, and that's a city council appointment to that board. The Golf Course Advisory Committee, reappoint Louise McCall from the Friends of Muni with a term to expire 10/9/26. The Municipal Services District Advisory Committee, and there again, this is another one that has specific backgrounds that they have to represent. And Mr. James McGee is Professional Services, and his term would expire July 1, 2025. Downtown Parking Advisory Committee, we recommend appointing Samantha Sawyer with the Downtown Business Alliance with a term to expire January 16, 2025. The Wilmington Tree Commission, appoint Andrew Blank, the Honorable Andrew Blank, with a term to expire June the 18th, 2025. The Joint City-County Workforce Housing Advisory Committee, appoint Morgan Moscal, that's an at-large member, with a term to expire August the 20th, 2024. And the Zoning Board of Adjustment, we would recommend reappointing Jeff Hovis with a term to expire August the 4th, 2026. And with that, I move these recommendations to the full council.
Okay, we have a motion to approve by Councilman Reinberg, second by Councilman Waddell. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item passes unanimously. That concludes our regular agenda. Are there any items to be brought forward by our city attorney?
Yes, sir, just briefly. Sitting out in the audience today, who has stuck with us through till 10:10 at night on his second day of work, I'd like to introduce, if you stand up, Michael Satterfield. He is a new attorney in our office. He started yesterday, and he will be kind of taking Sean's place as the head of our real property division, and Sean will move into the role more of deputy city attorney. And so Michael has been practicing for decades in here in Wilmington, and local in all of his practice, and we are very excited to have him. And so I would just ask you if you have a chance to say hello to Michael, and we welcome him to our office.
Normally, we don't get through till around 12. We're getting through early tonight.
Welcome on board. Yes, sir. Mr. Caudle?
Mr. Mayor, we have a request for a closed session. You have a motion before you, but we would entertain that. We'd ask you to entertain that motion at the appropriate time.
Okay. Madam Clerk? Mr. Waddell? Mr. Barnett? Mayor Pro Tem?
I know it's late, and I just got one thing I want to say. I went to see a movie on Sunday called The Sound of Freedom. It's about trafficking of human children, 4 and 5 years old, all the way up, and the most god-awful things you can't believe. And this is based on a true story. And it lasts 2 hours and 45 minutes, and at the end of it, the star of the show, Jim Caviezel, he has about a 3-minute message, and I'm telling you folks, it's powerful. I mean, we all hear about it, and this is the disturbing part. The United States of America is the #1 customer in trafficking, human trafficking, and it's the #1 revenue producer, more than drugs or anything else in the entire world, is human trafficking. So if you get a chance, go see it, because it's right here around us.
Mr. Henderson? Ms. Spears? Okay. With that, we're going to be going into closed session. Is there a motion to enter into a closed session pursuant to the provisions of North Carolina General Statute, Section 143-318.11A and 5, in order for the City Council to, number one, instruct staff regarding the city's negotiating position concerning the possible disposition of real property? We have a motion. We have a motion by Councilmember Anderson, second by Councilmember Waddell. Discussion. All in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Item passes unanimously. We will now be going into closed session and ask for everyone to please vacate the room except for the parties that will be speaking to us.